Warrior Lore. Chapter 361 Top Class Warriors. Chapter 361 Top Class Warriors. Late at night, the moon appeared like a silver tray hanging over the thousand-sword peak. Gu Xiao, Yu Qin, Dong Fangju, Qing Ming, the Queen of Sky, and the King of Earth were closing their eyes, sitting with solemn faces on the thousand-sword peel. They appeared to be waiting for someone. Not long after, dazzling fires came from the west as the sun god, Tang Yuannan, rode alone on the flame unicorn, stopping among the 6 god realm warriors. He looked at them coldly and then spoke up. "I don't know why have you called me here." When Tang Yuannan was talking, the sun power of his body condensed a scorching aura slowly spreading out from his body, covering everyone. The 6 people of Gu Xiao's group suddenly opened their eyes and looked toward Tang Yuannan simultaneously. "Bring Shurian out." Gu Xiao took a deep breath. His pupils looked like 2 sharp swords, dashing toward Tang Yuannan. Tang Yuannan's face slightly changed. He looked at Gu Xiao, shifting his eyes to the others, and said coldly, "Is this the decision of all 6 of you?" The group of them nodded altogether with unfriendly manners. "I don't have him," Tang Yuannan snorted, revealing a cold smile. He shook his head. "If you couldn't find him, why would you rely on asking me? Is the 3 gods sect that easy to bully?" "Hierarchy Tang," Qingming shouted solemnly. Clusters of green fires flickered in his eyes, which were glinting with a vicious trace. "After the battle between that little rascal and Ma Chi-dun, you were the one who took him away. Although he has come out later, you certainly have a connection with him somehow." The Queen of Sky fan Shang Yun also sneered. "During this time, we have been searching the entire Hengluo Sea. We have even checked around in the Kiara Sea, but we couldn't find that little rascal's whereabouts. The Endless Sea is very big, and many of us have exerted our God Realm cultivation base to search for him. However, we couldn't find anything, not even a trace. If you didn't hide him, who else did? Was it the remnant of the Yang family? As I have said, he is not in my hand." Tang Yuannan beamed a cold smile and continued, "The 3 of you have united to deal with him but still let him escape. And now, you assume that you could use your soul consciousness to find him? Although I don't know how mysterious he is, I think if he could escape your siege, he would absolutely be able to avoid the search of your soul consciousness. You come to me after you couldn't track him down yourselves. How rational is that?" "Hierarchy Tang." Yu Qin revealed a faint smile and said, "We have not only united, but we have also borrowed secret techniques, using the God Realm soul consciousness together with secret treasures of the Spirit Treasure Wonderland to carry the search to the entire Hengluo Sea and the Kiara Sea. However, we still couldn't find his trace. Not to mention that little rascal has only the Nirvana Realm, so even if he had the God Realm cultivation base, he shouldn't be able to escape from us when we join forces. Only the God Palace on the seabed of the 3 gods, sect with strange formations, can prevent our soul consciousness. If he is not at your place, where else can he be? Don't waste time talking with him." Qing Ming was livid with rage, standing up while the superb adjoined corpse's flame was burning up in his eyes. "If we unite together, destroying the 3 god sect is not a difficult matter. After demon dwellers had invaded the Endless Sea, the 3 god sect hasn't joined forces with us nor participated in our actions. Apparently, they have wicked intentions. That little rascal progresses every day, and thus his intimidation is growing larger every day. When he really grows up, none of us can survive." "That's right." Fan Xiang Yun also stood up and said, "Warrior Lore, instead of being wary of him day and night, we'd better solve it completely once and for all." The faces of Gu Xiao's and Yu Qin's group looked unfriendly. They seemed to have the intention of joining forces to kill Tang Yuannan. But at this moment, the moon in the sky suddenly brightened up. A pretty figure quietly appeared under the moonlight. A beautiful silhouette flew out from that full moon-shaped circle of light. That circle of light absorbed the moonlight in the air and then fell to a 5,000-meter-high mountain beside the Thousand-Sword Peak. Boom, boom, boom. That circle of light hit that 5,000-meter-high mountain, and thus instantly split and was broken down into countless stones. Interwoven with the moonlight, a full moon-shaped circle of light like the moon god Sharp Blade quickly flew to the mountain, crushed it into innumerable broken stone pieces, and thus made it collapse instantly. A horrible, oppressing pressure pressed down from that beautiful silhouette, enveloping everyone. The moonlight in the sky hastily condensed and congregated at that shadow, making her momentum soar crazily and endlessly. The faces of the group of Gu Xiao and Yu Qin were suddenly discolored. They looked at that beautiful silhouette with fear. Want to destroy my three-god sect? Are you ready to receive your own sect's consequences? The pretty silhouette was vaguely floating in the moonlight. The voice was clear but cold, containing a cruel and frightening tone, clearly showing a threat. 6 God Realm warriors all quieted down. Shurian is not in the three-god sect. If you really want a war, then we are willing to serve you. Being surrounded with the moonlight, that beautiful silhouette coldly said. Demon Dwellers' threats have not been solved yet, but you still want to destroy our three-god sect. And then you assume that you are those who can save the Endless Sea? It is ridiculous. After having finished talking, that appealing silhouette turned into a streak of moonlight and left. The sun god Tang Yuannan sneered coldly and said to the people of Gu Xiao's group, "It is my honor to introduce to you the moon god, Ouyang Lushuang. She has just entered the god realm not long ago. Before that, she had absorbed the 1,000-year moonlight and had been able to integrate the moon power of the ether. In this vast, endless sea, except for Chao Qiudao and Yang Yitian, I am afraid that no one can match her strength. If you don't believe it, you can try." After having finished his words, without concerning with the horrified look on the faces of Gu Xiao's group, Tang Yuannan rode the flame unicorn, turning into streaks of sunlight, and quickly left. The 6 people, including Gu Xiao, Yu Qin, Qing Ming, the Queen of Sky, the King of Earth, and Dong Fangju looked at each other, and then shifted their eyes to the high mountain that had just collapsed, all quieted down with grimaces on their faces. The Dark Demon Area. Fierce, towering white bone columns blockaded the Yang Tian Emperor, making his skin all disappear. Standing on the bone stage inside the formation technique, Yang Tian Emperor had become a blood-dripping skeleton, which had only tendons attaching it to the skeleton. He looked terrible while his face was a mix of blood and flesh. It looked like he had been tortured to death. There was a white bones Dharma body standing next to the bone stage. At this moment, that white bones Dharma body spoke up. "Yang Tian Emperor, do you want to feel more comfortable?" On the bone stage, Yang Tian Emperor's eyes, which were now only bare sockets without skin or flesh, were still just as bright and sparkling as before. He calmly looked at that white bones Dharma body and then said, "You are just wasting your time." Bo Sun revealed a cold smile. "This is your last chance. The Corpse Soul Bridge will be completed in several days. In 3 days, Qian's and my real body will officially step into the Endless Sea. In a maximum of 15 days, the 3 great Dark Kings of the underworld will also enter the Endless Sea. By that time, the Endless Sea's people will be in misery, and it will become the paradise of demon and dark dwellers." Yang Tian Emperor's eyes finally revealed a glint of terrified light. His bloody face slightly shivered, but he still didn't say anything. "Yang Tian Emperor, you are very good at playing tricks. I don't know what kind of tricks you use to help the Yang family stay hidden in the demon area. I have been searching around but couldn't find anything. If it weren't because you had this arrangement, there wouldn't be a way for them to prevent my soul consciousness from finding them just by relying on their own ability," Ba Sun snorted. "For 1,000 years, the Yang family has always gone in and out of the 4th demon area. The time I have stayed here is even longer than our time in the Endless Sea. My understanding of this demon area is not less than yours. Even you, Bo Sun, still don't know there are some strange areas in this land." Yang Tian Emperor proudly smiled and said, "Even if I die, as long as they follow my orders, you will never find them. The area that you explored last time is just a fake one that I set up. After going there, perhaps you suffered quite of a loss." A flame rose up in the sockets of the white bones Dharma body. "That's right. We thought that we found the Yang family's hiding place, but then realized that it was a trap. Many of my men were killed, but thanks to their death, the progress of building the Corpse Soul Bridge has been accelerated. As you know, I cannot kill my own family members for the Corpse Soul Bridge. Because of your arrangement, The completion of the bridge is getting much closer. I actually should thank you. Yang Tian Emperor's eyes changed afterward. You have a good grandson. That little rascal Shurian has caused us many troubles in the endless sea. He has even cut off one of Ma Chi-dun's arms. I don't know what you have done to that brat so that he, with his Earth Realm cultivation base, could injure Ma Chi-dun, who had the boundless demon saber in his hand. Bo Sun beamed a cold smile and continued, however, it is in the past. Once my real body enters the endless sea, the only pawn you have left will easily be killed. Your successor will have his soul scattered. Cut off Ma Chi-dun's arm? Yang Tian Emperor's eyes brightened, and he suddenly burst into laughter. So after all, it is not a waste to spin the immortal blood for him. He is really the lucky star of the Yang family. I had known that there were some mysterious things in his body, but I never thought that he could be exceptionally outstanding like this. Ha ha ha, brilliant kid. It seems that I still underestimate him. That little rascal is the same as you, making enemies everywhere. Currently, not only are we searching for him, but forces in the endless sea are also hunting him down. I have heard that he has escaped the siege of Qingming, the Queen of Sky, and the King of Earth. Moreover, he has injured the Queen of Sky severely. This brat is too much like you. He doesn't care about life and death or letting someone in his eyes. Bo Sun looked excited. Unfortunately, as for human beings, that characteristic is nothing different from bringing the perdition. We can obviously imagine his outcome. Human beings don't respect strong top-class warriors or potential youths. It is your greatest sorrow. A sign of sadness gleamed in Yang Tian Emperor's eyes. He nodded. Yes, I know how those people are. I hope he can have my luck this year and overcome all the bad things. If he doesn't die this time, his achievement in the future will surely be much more than mine. Ha ha ha, those kinds of people like Qingming, Fan Shangyun, and the King of Earth used to conceal when seeing me before. I really want to see them being pursued everywhere they go and killed by Shurian. Ha ha ha, I do believe that day will come. Arrogant. Bo Sun snorted coldly. You just wait and see. In a maximum of 1.5 years, I am sure I will bring that kid's head to you. As soon as he finished his words, flames inside the white bones Dharma's pupils disappeared. Bo Sun's host soul had left. Yang Tian Emperor kept silent for a long while before revealing a faint smile and muttering, Good kid, wait a little bit more. We will see each other very soon. In this world, who can really confine me? Chapter 362, The Strange Land. Chapter 362, The Strange Land. Shurian sat on the wooden boat, spending sleepless nights trying to perceive the northern dipper net, immersing his mind in deep thought. He always used his star martial spirit to connect with the 7 stars of the Big Dipper, and then borrowed the force from the 7 stars of the Big Dipper to condense into the northern dipper net. Gradually, he had a deeper understanding of the creation of the northern dipper net. Within 3 minutes, he could borrow the star power to condense 7 meteorites out of the northern dipper net. Once the condensation of the northern dipper net was successful and he could create the spiritual connection with star power, he could then comfortably control and attack any target he wished. Once the 7 meteorites collided with each other and burst out, the power generated was enough to injure the Sky Realm warrior severely. Although their power was no match for the combination of the 3 living forms, the ice-cold flame, the Holy Spirit God, and the Earth Flame, he could freely use it without worrying that it would drain out. The most important thing was that he somehow didn't feel the current northern dipper net at its ultimate form. Shurian had a premonition that the more profound his comprehension of the meaning of the stars was, the more powerful the northern dipper net would be. One day, the wooden boat suddenly entered a dark, boundless sea area. The strange and mysterious scene around had woken him up. Raising his head to look at the gray misty fog, he felt the peculiarity. He then suddenly released his soul consciousness to observe his surroundings. As soon as Shurian's soul consciousness left his sea of consciousness, it was instantly tied up as if mud was binding it. It didn't dissipate, but it couldn't reflect the surrounding environment to the sea of consciousness either. In this sea area, the murky fog shrouded over his head like a huge cage, which seemed to have strange magic that prevented any warrior who entered this area from using his soul consciousness to sense the situation. With a slight change in his face, Shurien rested his mind and meditated. He then suddenly realized that the connection between the star martial spirit and the stars in the sky had been cut off. He no longer felt the power of the stars in the sky, and he couldn't borrow that power to look through the misty fog. He thus figured out where he was. The dark magnetic noxious mist. It was the extreme eastern edge of the endless sea, which was the most mysterious and evil sea area, enveloped by a thick fog for billions of years. Inside this dark magnetic noxious mist, soul consciousness couldn't work. Other powers of the heaven and earth were also affected by this dark magnetic field, and thus had no effect here. This mysterious sea area could influence warriors' souls, making them fall into strange fantasies. Heaven and earth aura didn't exist here either. Standing on the wooden boat, closing his eyes to sense around for a while, Shurien was eventually certain that he had come to his desired destination. On the Sun Island, Xia Xinyan used to tell him about both mysterious and strange things in the dark magnetic noxious mist. She said that behind the dark magnetic noxious mist was the center of the Grace mainland, where many mighty beasts dwelled. Many strange treasures of heaven and earth had disappeared, and many mysterious secrets existed here. It was a good place for warriors to cultivate themselves in following the dark path. The current situation of the Endless Sea was very complicated. Warriors from all over were searching for his whereabouts. After the division of the three living forms, his real realm was only the Nirvana realm. Although he was confident that he could endure the Sky Realm warriors, he couldn't withstand God Realm warriors. Therefore, he had wisely decided to avoid the danger for now and not participate in the chaos in the Endless Sea. He wanted to enhance his body strength, and thus he was determined to go to the dark magnetic noxious mist before his mutation was complete. On the one hand, he wanted to take advantage of the dark magnetic noxious mist's environment to sharpen his own strength. On the other hand, he hoped that he could find Xia Xinyan. Previously, when he and Xia Xinyan had separated, Xia Xinyan had gone with Yi Zhangfeng and Lin Yiqi, who were from the dark magnetic noxious mist. He had a premonition that Xia Xinyan was still staying with them in the dark magnetic noxious mist. Hence, he came here with the hope that he could see his lover again. The wooden boat was moving slowly on the sea. Quietly sensing around, Shurien's face gradually changed. His pupils glinted with surprise. Without heaven and earth aura and under the impact of the dark magnetic noxious mist, other forces of heaven and earth couldn't exist in this noxious mist. So, if he consumed all of his profound qi, how could he supplement them? To attain profound qi, it required heaven and earth aura. With that thought, Shurien shuddered and hurriedly sent his spirit into the blood vein ring and took a high-graded profound crystal. Earlier that year, before entering the chasm battlefield, Yang Luo had brought hundreds of high-graded profound crystals and given them to him. He still kept these pure crystals in the blood vein ring, but because his mystery martial spirit could recover its power through murder, he rarely used these pure crystals. However, when entering such a strange place like the dark magnetic noxious mist where heaven and earth aura didn't exist, he suddenly remembered the pure crystals in the blood vein ring. Holding a chunk of pure crystal in his hand, Shurien activated his power, trying to absorb heaven and earth aura inside it. Strange things happened. The heaven and earth auras that had just been taken out of the pure crystal were influenced by the dark magnetic noxious mist. They evaporated instantly, not able to turn into condensed aura for him to absorb. Not effective. Shurien's face became dignified. The idea of leaving the dark magnetic noxious mist appeared in his mind. According to Xia Xinyan, there were various kinds of strange and dangerous things in the dark magnetic noxious mist where beasts raged fiercely. In this place, the only thing he could rely on was the force in his body. If he couldn't supplement profound qi, he would consume all of them really soon. If things kept going like this, he would be exhausted sooner or later and have no way to survive. Hence, he had to consider things more carefully. While he was hesitating, he suddenly raised his head looking around and immediately realized that he seemed to be lost. There were no sun, moon, or stars to identify the directions here. Surrounding him was the dark sea without any obstacles, reefs, or islands. And the seawater under his feet was not calm. He bowed his head to look and realized that the water flow kept changing, and thus his boat kept moving. He didn't know how many times his boat had changed directions. In this case, even if he wanted to go back, he was uncertain that he could find the same way to return. Thus, there was only one way, which was going to continue forward, going further inside this area, reaching the center of the Grace mainland. Shurien forced a wry smile and subconsciously shook his head. As God's will was so, it seemed that returning was now impossible. He then had to continue moving forward, hoping to see the mysteries that could surprise him inside the mist. Thinking in silence for a while, he became relaxed and tried to adapt to the current situation. He sat down, no longer sending his profound chi to the boat, but instead let the flow of water drive it freely. Without wasting his soul consciousness and profound chi, he held his breath, looked straight ahead, while calmly waiting, being aware of any special circumstances. Without the sun, moon, stars, or concept of time, all he could do was just sit still and let the boat flutter freely on the sea without any idea of where he was heading. One day later, Shurien's eyes brightened up. His wooden boat suddenly floated up into the air and slowly flew forward. The strange thing was he wasn't using any force. In the thick, misty fog ahead, he could vaguely see a huge black shadow. This shadow was suspended in the air like a magnificent mountain, which gave people a strange, insecure feeling. With a tense mind, Shurien was fully cautious. His eyes flashed up, looking at the huge black shadow ahead. He didn't know what it was. The wooden boat slowly approached as the silhouette of the shadow gradually became clearer. It was a mountain indeed. This mountain was hundreds of miles high, strangely floating above the sea, suspended in the air. There were plants, trees, flowers, but no beasts and other creatures. It was unknown where this mountain came from. It kept floating in the sky like an air balloon, not seemingly affected by gravity. Shurien was extremely astonished. Quietly sensing around, he immediately realized that there was no gravity here. Not only that, but the sea under his feet also emitted a faint gray smoke, which seemed to have some force that made the wooden boat fly up to the sky. He instantly decided to leave the boat, and after having consumed just a little bit of profound chi, he already arrived on the mountain peak. Sitting atop the mountain, Shurien looked down, observing this miraculous place. A colorful light beam suddenly flew over from the mountain in front of him. Shurien watched attentively for a moment and realized that this beam of light had definitely been released from a warrior. According to the direction of where that light beam came from, he knew that the place was thousands of meters away. However, because of the ineffectiveness of his soul consciousness in this area, together with the thick fog, he couldn't see the warrior who had shot out that beam of light, nor knew the opponent's cultivation base. He continued sitting for a while, observing the mountain, and then thought that he should go and check what or who it was. He didn't understand much about the dark, magnetic, noxious mist, so if he could meet that warrior, he would have many of his questions answered. With that thought in mind, he immediately used his profound chi to move toward its direction with moderate speed. Chapter 363, 3 Males and 2 Females. Chapter 363, 3 Males and 2 Females. A 1,000-meter-high mountain was suspended above the sea. A dazzling light beam dashed over from behind the mountain, accompanied by soft sounds, which were like the beasts roaring in the distance. Shurien stopped moving to watch that beam of light with cold eyes and carefully observe it. He then realized that the light contained extraordinary power, and the warrior behind the mountain should have the cultivation base in the 2nd or 3rd sky of Nirvana realm, or maybe in the sky realm. He secretly asked himself how intimidating that realm was, and at the same time, he tried to observe if there were God realm warriors or not. After that, he then felt more secure and quietly moved forward. Without gravity, when his body moved, it looked like a soft, elegant willow dashing forward with breakneck speed. In only 3 minutes, he already arrived behind the mountain. Hiding under a cliff, he quietly stuck his head out and observed the fight behind the mountain. 5 warriors were holding various secret treasures, violently fighting with 3 golden-eye snow dragons. The group consisted of 3 males and 2 females. All of them were still very young, around 20 years old. The 2 girls had beautiful, slender bodies as well as profound cultivation bases which seemed to be in the sky realm. The 3 males had sturdy bodies and prominent appearances. 2 of them had blonde hair, blue eyes, and had the 3rd sky of Nirvana realm cultivation base. They should be brothers, as they looked quite alike. The other one was a little bit younger. His face was long and pointed. His eyes were cold, and he also had the 3rd sky of Nirvana realm cultivation base. 3 males and 2 females together fought with 3 golden-eye snow dragons. They were taking the upper hand in this battle. There was another golden-eye snow dragon's body on the ground on the side. Blood was dripping out from its head. Its demon crystal should have been taken by those people. Golden-eye snow dragon was the 6th level beast, which could be compared to a Nirvana realm warrior. It had great strength and a sturdy build. Ordinary weapons could hardly injure it, and thus, it was tough to deal with. These 5 warriors with their outstanding abilities had jointly killed 1 golden-eye snow dragon. As for the remaining 3 golden-eye snow dragons, one of them was severely injured. Its tail had been cut off with blood and flesh blended stickily. It was continually roaring and resisting. As he watched the fight in front of him, he realized that the 3 golden-eye snow dragons didn't seem to be able to withstand the others' attacks any longer. They would soon be killed like the other dead golden-eye snow dragon. It was unknown where these 5 young warriors came from and how they could have such a profound cultivation base. Together with sparkling secret treasures in their hands, they didn't look like ordinary people. Shurian had been watching them for a while, and he was secretly aghast as he realized that the martial technique of these 5 warriors was quite mysterious. They were certainly 1 level higher than the outstanding young warriors in the Endless Sea. Fragmented blade. The female in a silk gown with a piece of sapphire tied on her waist suddenly shouted. The many sword lights that shot out from her jade-like hand were snow-white, bone-chilling, and very dangerous. They instantly pierced through 1 golden-eye snow dragon's body. The 5-meter-tall Tuet-long Su was abruptly stagnant in the air while its body emitted beautiful lights, splitting into different blocks. It had been slashed to death without shedding a drop of blood. Seeing that golden-eye snow dragon killed, the remaining 2 were finally panicked, ran away in 2 different directions. One of them was severely injured and blocked by the 4 people. Various attacks were cast out, striking and throwing that golden-eye snow dragon back to the sky. The other golden-eye snow dragon, which was not wounded, let out a roar, dashing toward the place where Shurian was hiding with breakneck speed. The female in the silk gown suddenly swung her arms, leaped up, and quickly chased after that golden-eye snow dragon like a cyclone. The distance between her and that golden-eye snow dragon was getting closer. Shurian stood up with his slightly changed face. That golden-eye snow dragon seemed to see him, suddenly roared, and opened its mouth, bursting out a stream of icy silver light. "Stop it!" As the female, who was chasing that golden-eye snow dragon, saw Shurian hiding there, she quickly called him out for help. Shurian's face darkened. When he saw that silver light approaching, he raised his hand, blasting the life seal. 7 handprints merged into one and struck the golden-eye snow dragon. Boom! The golden-eye snow dragon was bombarded by the life seal and bounced backward. The icy silver light that dashed toward Shurian was melted by the heat of the earth flame and disappeared, leaving no trace. Right after being hit by the life seal, the last golden-eye snow dragon was then attacked by the girl's fragmented blade even before it could stabilize its body. It was split into 16 blocks of meat floating in the air and fell away slowly. Shurian's eyes flashed up, staring at that golden-eye snow dragon's body. He realized that after it had died, those blocks of meat seemed to be affected by gravity and thus instantly fell on the mountain. The girl who had used a secret technique to behead the golden-eye snow dragon quickly flew over. Her fingertips shot out a slender beam of silver light toward that golden-eye snow dragon's head and then took out a sparklingly bright demon crystal. While she had been casting out her attacks to kill this golden-eye snow dragon, the other 4 warriors had also succeeded in exterminating the other injured one and harvesting 1 demon crystal. A while later, The 5 warriors gathered in together atop the mountain, looking toward Shuryen. Shuryen was standing on a cliff, observing with knitted eyebrows. He hesitated a little bit before moving toward those 5 warriors. He stopped when he was about 20 meters away from them, secretly on the alert. "Where are you from?" The girl in the silk gown, who was quite tall, squinted her eyes looking at him and asked while her hands were still playing with the demon crystal. "The endless sea." Shuryen contemplated for a moment before calmly replying. "Endless sea?" The girl seemed to be a little hazed, looking at the other beautiful girl next to her, and asked gently, "Kai, have you ever heard of that place?" Through the dark magnetic noxious mist toward the west, it is said that there is a sea area where plenty of warriors gather. It seems to be the endless sea. The girl whose name was Kai wore many colorful bracelets. Every time she swung her arms, crisp and sweet sounds resounded. She revealed a faint smile with a slightly despising look on her face and said, "Ayaya, the endless sea is a barbaric place. Although there are some powerful warriors there, it is still far less than our divine land. I have heard that the ancestors in the endless sea were warriors who couldn't develop in divine land, and thus they had crossed the sea to the endless sea, starting to live and form their forces there until now." "Ah," the girl named Ayaya slightly nodded without saying anything else. The 3/3 sky of Nirvana realm men threw a disdained look at Shuryen. One of them, who was wearing a cold face, also whispered, "Turns out he is an immigrant from an undeveloped area." Shuryen arched his eyebrows but didn't say anything. He was actually surprised. In his eyes, the endless sea was a vast area. A lot of warriors there were much stronger than those in the Merchant Union. Unexpectedly, in these people's eyes, the endless sea was just a place of barbarians and laggards. After having thought a while, he suddenly said, "Are you from the center land of the Grace mainland on the east of the dark magnetic noxious mist?" The 2 girls displayed their disdain, slightly smiled but didn't say anything. The other 3/3 sky of Nirvana realm men proudly nodded with superior manners. Shuryen had originally wanted to check with these 3 men about the situation around. However, as he saw their arrogant attitude, he felt disgusted, and the intention of talking with them had soon gone. He nodded with a cold face, clasped his hands and said, "See you again." After talking, he turned around and walked away. "Wait a minute," Ayaya suddenly spoke up. Shuryen shuddered, but his face didn't change. He was secretly well prepared. If something bad happened, he would immediately start to take actions first. The 5 of them with high cultivation base, miraculous martial techniques, as well as secret treasures in their hands were all outstanding talents like Yi Zhangfeng and Lin Yiqi, those whom he admired. If they really had wicked intentions, he had to use all of his power to be able to escape. Having come to this world for only 1 or 2 days, he understood well the danger of this place. He clearly knew that a powerful warrior here could kill someone else without any reasons. "What is it?" Shuryen asked as he turned his head around, revealing a smile like he didn't take any precaution, and looked at her with calm eyes. "You helped me earlier, so I give you a part of this demon crystal as a reward." Aya's words were simple and gentle. While she was talking, a dagger emerged in her hand, cutting the demon crystal into 3 parts. She then snapped her fingers, and one piece of the demon crystal flew toward Shuryen. Swoosh! Ayaya, each demon crystal in this dark magnetic noxious mist is very precious. Why are you wasting it? It turned out that was the man with cold temperament. "Borg, my father has taught me that when you owe someone a favor, you always have to repay it." Ayaya slightly squinted and said with a cold tone, "We should give him that part of the demon crystal. Without him, no one could have killed that golden-eye snow dragon. It is fair. Do you have a problem with what I am doing?" Right after she had finished her words, a dangerous aura suddenly was emitted from her body. Chapter 364, Virtue and Evil. Chapter 364, Virtue and Evil. The young man whose name was Borg instantly realized that the aura was coming from her body. His face slightly changed. He frowned and said, "Ayaya, I don't want this demon crystal for myself either. I just feel he will not be alive for long here. In this dark magnetic noxious mist, Only demon crystals of the beasts can be used to supplement the consumed profound chi. Each demon crystal here is precious. As we have just entered this place, we need to try our best to gather more demon crystals and shouldn't waste any of them. After talking, Borg threw a cold glance at Shurien and said arrogantly, "This kind of immigrant from the laggard area will die anyway, even if he has demon crystals. Giving it to him is such a waste." Shurien slightly frowned. At first, he hadn't been interested in demon crystals of the snow dragon and had intended to refuse Aya's kindness. However, after having heard that guy back catch say that the demon crystals could supplement profound chi in the dark magnetic noxious mist, he immediately changed his mind and determinedly decided to fight for it. That was why he didn't refuse it, but looked at Aya to see what she would say. "I said give it to him. Didn't you hear me?" Aya's countenance was getting worse and worse. Borg secretly snorted while his eyes shot out a trace of coldness. He then threw Shurien the piece of crystal in his hand. The speed of his throw was so fast that it made the piece of crystal screech like a weapon, piercing through the air like a shooting star. Shurien's face remained unchanged. Seeing the crystal approach, he raised his hand and clenched his fingers. A flow of bright light flew out from it. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. As soon as the demon crystal fell into his hand, a group of forces burst out wrapping around Shurien's hand. Shurien revealed a faint smile and quickly used his strength to control the demon crystal. The light on his fingertips suddenly condensed into something that looked like a white glove, covering his hand, and then gripped and constrained the demon crystal. When Shurien turned his hand over, the demon crystal piece instantly fell into the blood vein ring. Without saying anything further, Shurien nodded at Aya, didn't bother Borg's harsh look, turned around and walked away. "Wait a second." Kai smiled elegantly and spoke up. Shurien reluctantly turned back as he asked impatiently, "What else?" "Friend, being alone in this dark magnetic noxious mist is a little bit dangerous indeed. I'm wondering if you are interested in accompanying us for a short trip." Sai's oval face was quite charming. Her shiny, succulent red lips could mesmerize other people. Danger is everywhere in the dark magnetic noxious mist. If you go alone, you might either consume all of your profound chi or be killed by wicked things. If you go with us, at least you will have less unnecessary troubles. What do you think? Sister. Borg got irritated. He couldn't help but shout, "Why do you want to carry this burden? If he acts recklessly, he will harm all of us. What's made you think of this?" Kai smiled sweetly, winked at Borg signaling him, and she then looked at Shurien, seeming to wait for his decision. Aya knitted her eyebrows, strangely looked at Kai with an astonished face, and didn't say anything further. The two well-built young men with blonde hair and green eyes, who were standing at the side, slightly chuckled and nodded quietly. Shurien was suspicious, looking at those people and about to refuse them. However, when he witnessed their attitude, he was hesitant. He knew that this Kaiwai didn't have good intentions. Inviting him to accompany them was, in fact, just to use him. However, as he had just entered the dark magnetic noxious mist, he knew nothing about this place. He had heard Xia Xinyan talk a little bit about some mysteries of this place, but as for the details, she didn't know. In this case, traveling alone in the dark magnetic noxious mist might be dangerous. This group of warriors had a high cultivation base as well as a profound understanding of this place. Although going with them could lead him to encounter unpredictable events, he still could get more information about the dark magnetic noxious mist. Even if they didn't tell him directly, he could still have more of understanding about this place by paying attention to their conversations. He just needed to be careful. If the situation wasn't good, he would immediately leave them. It should not be too difficult. With that thought, Shurien quietly considered, then burst into laughter and said, "Well, I know nothing about this place. So, I will have to bother you." After talking, he stopped walking and maintained a safe distance with the five of them, revealed a smile, looking at them. "All right, we will need to take a rest first to restore our strength. Meanwhile, you can get familiar with the use of the demon crystal." Kai beamed a faint smile, nodded at Borg, and said, "Brother, you help take guard for me. Be alert to the unexpected appearance of the beasts." After talking, Kai gently flew away. Borg reluctantly turned around, looking at Shiryan coldly while murmuring something, and then caught up with Kai. Sister, what on earth are you doing? Borg walked toward her with a resentful face and complained, Isn't it better to let me kill that rascal to take that demon crystal back? We have discussed it before, but then Aya pretended to be fair and kind. Do you also want to act like her? Dark magnetic noxious mist had quite a lot of special things. One of them was soundproofing. Thanks to that, although the two of them stood just hundreds of meters away from Shiryan, they were not worried that Shiryan would be able to overhear their conversation, not to mention that they also intentionally lowered their voices. You are such a fool. As soon as Kaiwai had flown away, her smiling face instantly became cold while her beautiful eyes emitted an icy aura. She sneered and said, That guy is only in the second sky of Nirvana realm. You can easily kill him, but if you do so, you will consume more of your profound chi. Do you know how important profound chi is in this place? How long we can survive depends on it. Wasting it means you will die faster. Are you stupid or what? Seeing her cold face, Borg was a little scared and couldn't even speak normally. But that demon crystal. Can 1/3 of the demon crystal be enough to make up for the profound chi that you would have to consume to kill him? Kai snorted coldly. Borg was stunned a little bit, and then shamefully said, No, idiot. Kai bluntly cursed. Do you think that Aya really wanted to give up 1/3 of the demon crystal? She just wanted to use it to entice the opponent and thus weaken our strength. With your personality, after being scolded by her, you would sneakily leave us and kill that rascal? If you do that, you already fall into her trap. Borg's face changed instantly. If you leave us, and you will be on your own. What you gain is far less than what you will lose even if you can get that demon crystal. Later, if you encounter other warriors or beasts or any traps in this dark magnetic noxious mist, you will hardly be able to keep yourself alive. Kai continued emotionlessly. Aya has just used 1/3 of the demon crystal to entice that little rascal, and he has already wanted to take actions with you. Even you are lucky to be alive. Still, you have consumed some of your profound chi already. Thus, she has gotten what she wants. Idiot. After Borg had listened to Tsai's curse, his face immediately changed. He was scared and broke out in a cold sweat, contemplated for a long while before gritting his teeth and speaking up, That woman's heart is indeed barbaric. After having entered the dark magnetic noxious mist, our group only has 5 people left. Aya still retains her power and thus harvests the most. In the critical point of time, she will push others to death before herself. She always uses the least of her power to get the most benefits. If you continue to be stupid like this, she will kill you sooner or later. I have reminded you many times, but you never listen to me. You really don't know what life and death are, Kai said unhappily. Borg felt ashamed, constantly nodded. Sister, I am wrong. Remember, you shouldn't take any reckless actions next time. Did you see if the other 2 brothers Laoluan have said anything? Kai was giving her brother lessons while knitting her eyebrows, looking at the 2 of guys with blonde hair and blue eyes at the same time. She lowered her voice and said, When you take action, be careful with the 2 brothers Laoluan. Although their cultivation bases are only in the 3rd sky of Nirvana realm, if they join forces, their real strength can be compared to Sky Realm warriors. Even I am not sure if I could defeat them. So, you should not underestimate them. Borg shuddered as he became quietly more watchful, nodded his head and asked, Sister, why did you ask that little rascal to stay with us? Idiot. Kai displayed a disappointing look. Have you and the brothers Laoluan taken the same path recently? Borg nodded honestly. Pathfinding is the most dangerous task. If being surrounded by a flock of beasts, a Pathfinder would be killed for sure. If accidentally getting lost in a trap, a Pathfinder wouldn't be able to preserve his or her life for very long. Therefore, I asked that kid to go with us to replace you to trace the path, using him to protect your life. You have to be grateful to him for taking the risk for you. Understand? You are such a fool. Kaiwai said with disappointment. Thank you, sister. Borg was moved and said, Talk less, observe more. Don't be a blind fool being controlled by others. Kai scolded him and then closed her eyes. Guard for me. Don't let anyone come close, especially that Aya. Yes, Borg bowed his head and bent down, obediently standing next to her without any negligence. He also understood that the reason why his sister cared for him was that he still had his value. If he couldn't do this task well, he would lose his value, and maybe his sister would not care about his well-being anymore. With that thought, he was even more serious as he secretly guarded against Aya in the distance. His face slightly changed when he saw Aya slowly walking toward that strange rascal because he thought that she had a plan. Borrow that rascal's strength? He was suddenly resuscitated and enlightened after Tsai's curses. Therefore, right now, the way he looked at Shurien was no longer hostile but pitiful. This kid was really unlucky as he was being fooled by his sister and that wicked Aya, and yet, he was still grateful to them. Chapter 365. Beasts, Dangerous Traps, and Humans. Chapter 365. Beasts, Dangerous Traps, and Humans. My name is Laoli. I am Laoluin. The two guys with blonde hair, blue eyes, and sturdy bodies looked at Shurien, sneered, and introduced themselves. Shurien. Nice to meet you, Shurien. I hope that we will get along well during the journey ahead. After talking, the two guys beamed a smile, walked shoulder to shoulder to another place, about a few hundred meters away from Aya and Kai, and then sat down. One of them took out a demon crystal and meditated to restore his strength. The other stood to the side, staring at the void like he was in a trance. Shurien remained calm and secretly observed the brothers Laoluin and Laoli. Then, he looked toward Kai and Borg and said to himself that this group seemed to have constraints among them. While Kai was restoring her profound chi, Borg was guarding for her. Laoli and Laoluin were also on alert. It turned out that this group of 5 was not in solidarity. They were taking precautions against each other. Kai and Borg were on one side, the two brothers Laoluin and Laoli were on another side, and Aya was alone. Although the 3 parties were traveling together, they didn't trust each other and were always on alert. They were very cautious even when they were restoring their strength. It was easy to see that these 5 people didn't get along well as he had originally thought. After observing these people secretly for a while, Shurien realized their strange relationships, and he thus didn't dare to let down his guard and was even more cautious. After the two brothers Lao had introduced themselves, Aya arched her eyebrows and walked over to Shurien. She stopped 10 meters away from him and coldly said, I am a little bit curious about the Endless Sea. Can you tell me about the place? The girl in a silk gown with a jade belt wrapped around her small, appealing waist asked. She had beautiful, straight legs. Her thighs were vaguely exposed through the thin silk, which was mesmerizing. She was standing alone. Her eyelashes were very long, and her lucid eyes were as clear as water. Sometimes they flashed up with beams of light, as if they wanted to pull men's souls into their pupils. Before, as Shurien had stood quite far away and been on the alert when he had first met her, he hadn't carefully observed her. As she was approaching, Shurien goggled watching her and couldn't help but praise her as he had never thought this girl was this heart-stirring. Her beauty could be compared with Xia Xinyan and Chao Zhilan, which was the root of all troubles. The Endless Sea was in the west of the dark magnetic noxious mist. There are only 5 sections where warriors gather, including the Kiara Sea, the Hengluo Sea, Shurien said with a low voice and a calm face. He told her about the situation of the Endless Sea but didn't mention the forces there, the invasion of the 4th demon area and the 7-fold underworld, nor about his origin or his situation in the Endless Sea. Such an interesting place. Aya's long eyelashes slightly shivered while she whispered and revealed a thoughtful look. After a long while, she suddenly looked toward him and curiously asked, Why do you come to this dark magnetic noxious mist? Did you come here to get to the Grace mainland? I come here to temper myself, Shurien said indifferently. I have encountered a bottleneck during my cultivation. I have heard that there are many mysteries in the dark magnetic noxious mist, so I came here to try my luck, to see if I can find something here to have a breakthrough. Aya's eyes brightened up while she nodded. It seems that the Endless Sea has good warriors. Shurien sneered but didn't say anything. The dark magnetic noxious mist has 3 fatal dangers: beasts, dangerous traps, and humans. Aya hesitated a little bit and then said gently, "Beasts are the easiest to deal with. Dangerous traps are the second. Humans are unpredictable and the most terrible ones. You should be careful when you are here." "Humans?" Shurian's face darkened. "That's right, the same kind as ours." Aya nodded earnestly, glanced at the other groups of Kai and Laoli, and then said to Shurian, "You have to be careful with the people next to you. In this place, companions are nothing. In crucial moments, not only are they not trustworthy, but they can be a fatal threat." After mentioning this, Aya seemingly wanted to continue but then stopped, pondered for a few seconds, displayed a complicated look, then threw a glance at Shurian and said, "Being alone is sometimes safer. You are alone, so you should take good care of yourself." When her plump thighs under the thin silk moved slightly, Aya had already flown hundreds of meters away and quickly disappeared into thin air. Borg and Laoluin, who were taking guard, seemed to let out a sigh of relief when they saw Aya fly away. Their vigilance was slightly relaxed as they felt more assured and sat down. Shurian shuddered within his heart. Through this small detail, he immediately realized that Aya was probably the most dangerous in this group. Among these 5 warriors, Aya and Kai had the Sky Realm cultivation base, while the other men had the third sky of Nirvana Realm. Shurian recognized that no one in this group had good intentions or was trustworthy or easy to deal with. Among them, the guy Borg, who was impatient and easily irritated, was the easiest one to deal with. The remaining 4 people were all calm and discreet. He especially could not see through Kai and Aya. However, he felt that these 2 girls were always against each other. They seemed to be harmonious, but it was not their true mind. The 5 of them had divided into 3 teams, scattering in 3 directions. They took turns to absorb the demon crystals to restore their profound chi. They didn't talk to each other, which gave others the feeling that they were getting along well, but they were actually guarding against one another. After carefully observing for a while, Shurian regained the calmness in his heart. He quietly backed off and stopped when he was 800 meters away from Laoluin and Laoli, who were nearest to him. Looking around, he noticed that behind him and to his sides were rocky mountains, and thus the predictable danger could only come from the front. He sat down, took 1/3 of the demon crystal out, and started to absorb the power inside it. Different from other demon crystals, this demon crystal had been taken out from the beast's body in the dark magnetic noxious mist, and thus it could adapt to a particular environment, not able to be dissipated. Demon crystals were indeed nutrient supplements for the power's restoration. GoldenEye Snow Dragon was a 6th-level beast, which was equivalent to a human Nirvana Realm warrior. The power of this piece of demon crystal was not vigorous anyway. Demon crystals, after all, were not pure chi. The loss of the crystal's power was inevitable after it was converted into available profound chi for warriors to use. After the power of this 1/3 demon crystal piece was converted, Shurian could only absorb half of it, which was equivalent to 1/10 of his profound chi. Before that, when he had cast out the life seal, he hadn't consumed much of his profound chi. This small piece of demon crystal helped him not only restore the amount of the consumed profound chi when he had used the life seal earlier, but also reinstate a part of the amount of the depleted profound chi from the past few days. While meditating and waiting for the demon crystal piece in his hand to become a useless stone, he felt the profound chi in his body about to reach its peak, around 9 out of 10 parts. Although he didn't reach the peak yet, he was already satisfied. He squinted as he looked ahead and saw Laoli and Kai had completed their power restoration and were keeping watch for Borg and Laoli to meditate. No one knew where Aya had gone. As she was alone and didn't trust anyone, she obviously had to choose a remote corner to ensure that there would be no unexpected events taking place during her meditation. Shurian carefully observed everything and continued to maintain his meditating posture. After a long while, Borg and Laoluin completed their power restoration. The 4 of them then gathered in one place and waved at Shurian. Shurian stood up and walked toward them while still staying alert. When he was around 10 meters away from them, he stopped and comfortably asked, "Should we continue on our way?" He quietly observed them and found out that Borg's hostility had weakened compared to earlier. Although he still wore a cold face, his eyes no longer had any sign of hatred. This gave him some doubts as he didn't know what Kai said to Borg for his attitude to change that much. Aya hasn't returned yet. Wait for her for a while. Kai stated pretentiously, revealing a sweet smile as she boringly played with a bracelet on her snow-white arm. Aya doesn't trust anyone. She doesn't allow anyone to come close when she meditates. Early on, we had another companion. As she was meditating for quite long and hadn't come back, that person was worried and went over to call her. That person didn't come back afterward. Nobody knows what happened. A strange light flashed up in Shurian's eyes. Kai coldly smiled in her heart. As she had got what she wanted, she didn't say anything further, just sneered and looked toward the direction Aya headed earlier. The 5 people suddenly quieted down, and no one spoke. Thus, the atmosphere was quite strange. Not long after that, Aya quietly appeared from a distance and gently stepped forward, moving effortlessly. "We can go now," Aya said, her face looking indifferent. "Now that we have one more member, we should reallocate the Pathfinder job. What do you think?" "Let the newcomer do it then. He has to do it at least 1 or 2 times. Kai slightly chuckled as he threw a glance at Shurian and said, "Pathfinder is the easiest job. As soon as he discovers a danger, he immediately retreats. This kind of job is a test for the newcomer's reaction and observance. What do you say?" Kai looked at Laoli, Laoluin, and Borg. Unsurprisingly, the 3 of them nodded, seeming to have reached an unspoken understanding. Aya nodded as she saw the majority of the crew agreed, and then said, "I don't know much about this place. You go first to find a way. If you encounter beasts, you should call us. If you see dangerous traps, you have to retreat. If you meet humans, you have to observe their cultivation base and the number of people." Shurian said to himself that it was not going well for him. After linking thoughts in his mind, he finally beamed a smile, nodded in agreement to take the task, and said, "Not a problem." Chapter 366, Pathfinder. Chapter 366, Pathfinder. Shurian was reluctant. These 5 people clearly didn't have good intent when they asked him to stay. He had been well prepared as he had guessed that they would ask him to do the Pathfinder's job. However, in his view, it would not be safer if he left these 5 people and went off on his own. His understanding of the dark magnetic noxious mist was too little. Venturing around in here, he might encounter powerful beasts or dangerous traps. Therefore, what they asked him to do was not too difficult to do. They were 5 people divided into 3 parties that watched over each other. This was exactly what he had expected. He thought to himself that although he would not be completely safe, he could still take advantage of these 5 people to handle several affairs as he pleased. If they united, he would not dare to stay with them for much longer. He also knew that Kai and Borg wanted to use him, turning him into a sacrifice. In the dark magnetic noxious mist, there was no heaven and earth aura, and hence, if ordinary warriors wanted to restore their profound chi, the only way was to kill the beasts. However, he was different. He considered Kai, Aya, Borg another kind of beast. If they died, he would absorb all of their auras and thus restore his strength. With his specific mystery martial spirit, nothing was impossible, even in the dark magnetic noxious mist. As long as someone died, he would get what he needed. Therefore, staying with these 5 people would probably bring him benefits as well. This group always had bad intents toward him, so why should he care? "Are you ready? Let's go." Aya was slightly surprised as she saw him readily agree with a nod. She took out a delicate, square compass from her storage ring. A strange pattern was engraved on the surface of the compass. Its 4 corners were encrusted with 4 demon crystals, which seemed to provide energy for the compass. Aya held the compass in her hand. Her small finger pointed to the center of the compass, seeming to identify the direction. Kai didn't say a word. Her eyes gazed at the compass in Aya's hand, paying attention to the direction that the compass pointed as she was in fear of Aya's mischief. In the middle of the compass, a silver needle was slightly trembling before it stopped and pointed to the left side of Shurian. Aya looked at that direction for a moment, put the compass back into the storage ring, and then said, "The direction has been determined?" Kai and others nodded with a smile. Ayaya didn't say anything further. As the tip of her foot slightly touched the stones on the ground, she instantly leaped up, flying away with moderate speed, as she wanted to save her profound chi as much as possible. Shurian, aren't you coming? Kai waited until Ayaya had left, moved a little bit backward, looked at him with a smile and said, "You should follow Ayaya. When she asks you to go to the front, maybe there's something abnormal. Be careful, and remember to shout out loud if you see the beasts. Otherwise, we are afraid that we will arrive there late, and you will probably—" Shurian's face remained unchanged. He clasped his hands and caught up with Ayaya. After Shurian had left, Sai's smiling face gradually disappeared. She frowned and murmured, "This guy is very careful. I don't know what Ayaya has told him, but I feel that he seems inclined toward Ayaya. Ayaya has the most powerful strength. If she has this guy's assistance, she will be even more dangerous." Borg wanted to say something, thinking to himself that it was his sister who had asked to keep this kid. Borg remembered when Kai had scolded him earlier, and he had endured it without daring to ask. Until now, he felt a little bit puzzled. The brothers Laoli and Laoluan chuckled while their eyes displayed some secret meanings. They didn't talk to Kai but flew toward Shurian instead. Kai coldly smiled and then talked to Borg. "It is not easy to bully that little rascal. You should be watchful. Don't let him be too close to Ayaya. I am afraid Ayaya will seduce him, and he will then voluntarily serve and protect her. Although I am not afraid of it, it is still troublesome. If you have a chance, remember to provoke him to break the relationship between him and Ayaya. It is best if you can make him hate Ayaya. Do you understand?" Borg was startled, but forced a wry smile and nodded. "I will try my best." Kai didn't say anything further. She flipped her hands, producing a pleasant sound, and flew in Shurian's direction. Ayaya was taking the lead, and Shurian was following her. The brothers Laoluan and Laoli were next, and the last two were Kai and Borg. A line of 6 people maintained the distance of 20 meters from each other. The flying speed was not very fast as they had to save their profound chi as much as possible. Shurian was always on alert from in front and from behind as he carefully observed any movements on his sides. Every time Ayaya flew to a mountain, she stopped for a short while and took out the compass to check the direction. After determining that there were no abnormalities, she then continued to move forward. Shurian was 20 meters behind her, watching Aya's indistinct figure in the sea of clouds. In this zero-gravity environment, her body looked like a willow with her small waist, long limbs, and plump thighs. He felt quite pleased but didn't dare to have any wicked thoughts. They had been flying for a long while. Ayaya was still silent without uttering a word. She took out the compass to check every time she stopped in front of a mountain and then hurriedly left, not asking Shurian to scout. Shurian didn't dare to relax, always paying attention to the surrounding area, guarding against the 2 brothers, Laoluan and Laoli, as he was afraid that if he were not vigilant, the 2 brothers would ambush him. Suddenly, Ayaya stopped in front of another mountain, took out the compass and observed their surroundings. After a while, Ayaya turned around looking at Shurian and said, "There is something strange in the gap between the 2 mountain peaks. Go check what is over there." Shurian nodded and moved to Aya's position while still staying alert. Ayaya turned her head around watching him approach. Shurian knew that Ayaya was guarding against him. He sneered inside his heart, but still kept a natural look on his face. He didn't look at her. Instead, he focused on the mountain's cliff in front of him. He attentively observed it while exposing a thoughtful expression. Aya's vigilance wasn't reduced. She continued looking at Shurian until he passed her side and went forward. After that, she then relaxed a little bit, but her eyes were still watching Shurian's back carefully. There is a high possibility that beasts are hiding on the side of the mountains. You should observe carefully. It is best if you can find out how many there are of them as well as their levels. Just after Shurian flew past her, he heard her cold reminder. "Yes," Shurian replied coldly. His face suddenly darkened while he was activating his profound chi. A stream of refining power quietly rolled in his veins. While the profound chi was running, his body slightly trembled. It seemed that the tremendous power in his body could explode at any time. After perceiving the body's transformation, Shurian's eyes gradually calmed down. Ayaya didn't say a word. Her beautiful, slender body stood in the misty group of clouds in the air while she looked at Shurian with a cold face. Then suddenly she turned around, glancing at the two brothers Laoli and Laoluin who were coming close to her. When the two brothers saw Aya's scrutinizing look, they stopped moving and revealed a bright smile. Laoli looked at Shurian, then Ayaya, and asked, "How is the situation? What can it be?" "Beasts," Ayaya answered coldly and turned back to look at Shurian. The two brothers didn't ask anything further. One of them looked at Ayaya, and the other one looked at Kai. They paid attention to both the front and back. The two mountains were about 500 meters high. It was all red on the top of the mountains. Some abnormal trees and plants seemed to grow there. Between these two mountain peaks, there was a saddle which was 100 meters wide. The thick, misty fog made this area even more dark and gloomy. Dense plants and trees fully covered the mountain flanks. Because of the heavy fog, nothing could be seen clearly. There were some faint black shadows which looked like rocks or some plants. In the case where soul consciousness couldn't be used, and one could only observe with his own eyes, going closer was the only way to know the situation better. Shurian started to activate his profound chi and got closer to the other cliff. His eye brightened up, staring at black shadows on the two flanks of the mountain, wanting to see what they were after all. Sizzle, sizzle. It was the sound of pythons coming up from the mountain flanks. Shurian could only see the black shadows suddenly move and fly out from the cliff. That shape should be a purple gold python. Purple gold python was a 6th-level beast that lived in groups and liked to be in the icy, environment. There were 2 yellow and purple round patterns on its skin. Its body was from 7 to 10 meters long. It had sharp fangs and could spew out the toxic fog. Moreover, it could quickly dart out, while its big, long, vigorous body could instantly wrap around and break a warrior's waist. As soon as a purple gold python that was wrapped around a tree on the mountain flank saw him, it immediately sprang toward him with breakneck speed, while its mouth spurted out purple venom aimed straight at Shurian. With a quick glance, Shurian now realized that there was a total of 8 pythons rushing toward him. His face couldn't help but change. Each of these purple gold pythons was 8 to 9 meters long. Their mouths were full of fangs. Their small eyes flashed up with poisonous lights that frightened people out of their wits. Without thinking, he immediately moved his profound chi to his legs. As soon as the venom reached him, he had already jumped backward. There are 8 6th-level purple gold python. Shurian's figure retreated as fast as lightning and then stopped around 100 meters in front of Ayaya. He turned his head around and shouted, "Kill them!" Aya's eyes brightened up. Her face was a little excited. Her body dashed toward the group of purple gold python like a sharp spear. Chapter 367. The God's Soul Secret Treasure. Chapter 367. The God's Soul Secret Treasure. 8 purple gold pythons arched their heads and waved their tails, diving out from the cliff with incredible speed. Terrifying eyes flashed up, looking brutally at Shurian. Shurian snorted coldly and stood still on the spot, waiting for the purple gold pythons to come. If he alone fought with these 8 grown-up purple gold pythons, he was not sure that he could kill them all. However, together with the other 5 people, who had unpredictably profound strength, the situation would be different. Indeed, Aya's body looked like a spear that was shot out with intimidating momentum. She instantly came to his position but didn't stop. Instead, she continued to dash forward into the place where those pythons were gathering. Her slender body kept changing in the air, giving other people the feeling that they could never catch her. A bunch of dark blue lights shot out from her fingers. Those sharp lights, which were flashing on and off, contained an extremely powerful force. The dark blue lights intertwined in the void, forming a light net covering all of the pythons in just a short while. A clear shout resounded coldly. Ayaya curved her waist, penetrated the light net in the air, and stood opposite the group of purple gold python. Fragmented blade. After her shout, a bundle of icy light, shaped like a sword, flew toward the group of purple gold python. The 2 purple gold python in the front were slashed down and split away even before they could spurt out their venom. Under the control of Aya's 5 fingers, 2 pellucid demon crystals instantly fell into her palm and then disappeared into the storage ring right after the ring had flashed up. Behind her, the 4 people of Lowly's and Tsai's group were worried as they saw Aya had quickly taken the 2 demon crystals first. Thus, they put all their strength into flying over. A bundle of pink light beams suddenly glinted and zoomed across Shurien, rushing forward to fight for the demon crystals of the purple gold python. Kai was as charming as a fairy. Her clothes fluttered while the bracelet on her pale arm suddenly flew out, producing a terrifying whistle and dazzling lights. While flying toward the purple gold pythons, the bracelet suddenly had a transformation. Inside of it shot out a sharp, 1-meter-long saber with blazing lights slashing the purple gold pythons into pieces. Borg's eyes flashed up with a furious light. A pellucid, 1-meter-long sword flew out from his sleeve and instantly turned into a giant 300-meter-long dragon, raising its face up to the sky, howling, opening its mouth and swallowing a purple gold python whole. A bunch of chilled silk inside that crystal dragon's belly wrapped around the purple gold python and then crushed it within seconds. The 2 brothers loudly chuckled while both of them were standing on a purple gold python, controlling its mouth, preventing it from moving. A mighty power burst out from their bodies as they continuously punched the purple gold python's body. In moments, the python turned into a sticky pulp of flesh and blood. Shurien stood at the side, frowning and looking at the 5 people killing the purple gold python. Very quickly, they had harvested all 8 demon crystals. Aya was the fastest and thus got 3 demon crystals. Kai got 2, Borg had 1, and the brothers Lowly got 1 each. 8 purple gold pythons had been killed and their demon crystals had been stored inside the storage ring. Although Shurien had detected the purple gold pythons first, he didn't get anything. He stood motionlessly looking at them, harvesting the demon crystals. Shurien wasn't frustrated either. Even though he didn't harvest anything this time, he had carefully observed those 5 people and knew more about their abilities. Among them, Aya was the most powerful. She alone had killed 3 purple gold pythons. Kai ranked second. The 2 brothers Lowly were number 3. Borg was the worst, and he had to use his secret treasure to be able to kill 1 purple gold python. Aya's martial technique was mysterious. Her actions were quick, precise, and ruthless. Kai was unpredictable with her peculiar secret treasures. The 2 brothers Lowly had terrifying forces. Moreover, they also wore gauntlets which seemed to help increase their strength. Having stood aside and quietly observed them, Shurien had the better understanding of their abilities as well as their attacking methods. The purple gold python's dead bodies were pulled down into the sea under the gravity's influence and disappeared shortly. The 5 of them carefully stored those demon crystals and seemed to be very satisfied with their harvest. As Shurien didn't get anything, they comforted him and advised him not to let the opportunity go but to take action immediately. Shurien beamed a smile and nodded. His gesture looked like he was modestly listening to their advice. After that, the 5 of them separated again like before and then used demon crystals to restore their profound chi. 4 of them stayed on this side of the mountain, and Aya went alone to the other side. While Kai was meditating, Borg walked to Shurien after Aya had left. I did not treat you well earlier because I didn't think you were worthy. However, after this cooperation, I found you are more useful than I have imagined. Borg came over with a smile, seemingly wanting to break Shurien's reservations toward him. Shurien also smiled, looked at Batcatch, nodded and said, I hope that we can continue to cooperate well. We are happy to work with you. Borg goggled and lowered his voice. At least, my sister and I will have good cooperation. The others, I am not sure. After talking about it, Borg couldn't help but look toward the mountain where Aya was meditating and continued with a low voice. As you have known, Aya didn't have good intentions when she gave you 1/3 of the demon crystal. She actually wanted to use it to provoke me to kill you. When talking about this, Borg forced an embarrassed smile. You also know how precious demon crystals are in the dark magnetic noxious mist. If we want to survive in here, we have to rely on demon crystals. Earlier, as I thought that you were useless but was given 1/3 of the demon crystal, I couldn't help. Borg used those words that Kai had told him, only adjusting them a little bit, and told Shurian almost the same thing. After explaining things for a while, he gritted his teeth and said with a strange voice, "Among us, Aya is the most intimidating. She has used different ways to kill other fellows who had entered here with us. Shurian, you have to pay attention to Aya. Don't be killed because of her. I have come here to warn you. If you are alive, I will not have to scout, and thus I really hope you will be alive as long as possible. Understand?" Shurian sneered coldly inside his heart, but he still wore a grateful visage, nodded and said, "Thank you, Brother Borg, for reminding me." As long as you can understand it." Borg revealed a smile, nodded, and then went back to Tsai's place. After that, he began to restore his strength while Kai was guarding for him. "Shurian, you were able to get away from those purple gold pythons besieged quickly. Such an amazing reaction. If it were me, I would probably have been poisoned." Laoli, who was not far away from Shurian, laughed and spoke up. "The python's venom can paralyze your nerves. Once you are covered with venom, your strength will be gone. The fluid inside a purple gold python's belly is really horrible. Any creatures that are swallowed into their stomach will die shortly after." Shurian was stunned. He was not very clear but still beamed a smile. "Do you want a drink?" Laoli raised a bottle of wine in his hand, and without waiting for Shurian to reply, he took out a delicate bowl, filled it with the wine, and then said, "You are a mighty man. I am sure you like to drink. Let's drink together and become good friends." "Thank you, Laoli, big brother." Shurian walked over with a big smile, as if he was very relaxed without any precautions. He then sat in front of Laoli, took the bowl of wine, and raised his head, gulping down the wine. Nor far away from there, Laoluin closed his eyes, meditating. His rough eyebrows slightly shivered, seemed to be secretly alert, but then quickly relaxed. "Ha ha ha, you are indeed our fellow." Laoli burst into laughter as if he was really excited. "Danger is everywhere in the dark, magnetic, noxious mist. We can be killed at any time. So, if we can enjoy a little bit, why not, right?" Shurian nodded. "You don't seem to know about the dark, magnetic, noxious mist?" Laoli asked unintentionally. Chapter 368, Hiding Real Competence. Chapter 368, Hiding Real Competence. "You don't know the effect of the God Soul?" A trace of disdain that Laoli was trying to hide was now revealed in his eyes. He asked Shurian with astonishment. Shurian just smiled embarrassedly, didn't explain himself. When a third sky of Spirit Realm warrior enters the true God Realm, he can refine his host soul into God Soul. God Soul has a variety of marvelous effects. One of them is the criterion to distinguish between true God Realm warriors and Spirit Realm warriors. Once the condensation of the God Soul is completed, a warrior officially becomes a God Realm warrior with an immortal soul. Thus, even if he was dead, he can always use the God Soul to be revived. Except for some specific techniques and secret treasures that can destroy the God Soul, it is very hard to get rid of. "We can say that it is the root of the true God Realm warrior's strength," said Laoli with a solemn voice. Shurian was stunned for a while before revealing a wry smile and then said, "In the Endless Sea, we don't have true God Realm warriors, that's why." The disdain in Laoli's eyes increased a little bit more. He nodded with a smile and said, "Is that so? It seems that warriors of the Endless Sea are indeed not as good as our Divine Lands. In Divine Land, not only are there true God Realm warriors, but there are also more than one. The true God Realm warriors in Divine Land are the supreme existence, the ones in power, and the pillars of Divine Land the land." Shurian said with surprise, "Divine Land deserves to be the center of Grace Mainland." "That is obvious." A trace of pride flashed up in Laoli's eyes. "Only warriors of Divine Land can have a deep understanding of martial arts. All kinds of supernatural powers originate from our Divine Land." Shurian beamed a faint smile, nodded without saying anything more. From Lin Yiqi and Yi Zhangfeng, he had faintly known that behind the dark magnetic noxious mist was the Grace Mainland. The level of the warriors in Divine Land was indeed better than that of the warriors in the Endless Sea. The supreme warriors of the Endless were only in the Spirit Realm, while those of the Divine Land were in the true God Realm. It was obvious to tell which one is better. Spirit Realm was already God in ordinary warriors' eyes. However, Shurian had heard that Spirit Realm warriors in true top-class warriors' eyes were only false gods. A false god and a true god were as different as chalk and cheese. Some people said that true god warriors had the support from the god's powers and possessed earth-shaking supernatural strength. A false god couldn't be compared to it. What are the marvelous features of the pure god soul? Shurian's heart was agitated. His curiosity was too big that he couldn't help but ask. Some people have said that there is a strange land inside the dark magnetic noxious mist. After the true god realm warriors are dead, their souls are still bounded with their bodies due to the impact of some particular circumstances. During many months and years, all the memories are worn out, and only the profound perception of martial arts remains. Laoli took a deep breath. His eyes glinted with hot flames. God's soul in the strange land doesn't have memory but the perception of martial arts. It is the martial arts perception of the true God realm warriors. Shurian said in shock, "You are saying that?" Laoli nodded. Flames in his eyes were intensified. He said, "Once we can get the pure God soul, we can perceive their martial arts. Can you imagine how the transformation would be?" Shurian was dismayed, but at the same time, he couldn't restrain his greed. Why did Xia Xinyan have that endless potential? Why didn't she have any bottlenecks? Once the power in one's body reached a certain level, that person had to overcome bottlenecks to enter a new realm. It was because of the reincarnation martial spirit. The reincarnation martial spirit was terrifying. It could use the power of reincarnation, but the feature that had frightened people the most was the past life partial arts comprehension. With that comprehension, Xia Xinyan didn't need to worry about bottlenecks, and she would never encounter a possessed by the devil state. Once her strength had accumulated to a sufficient degree, she could easily enter a new realm. Was the pure God soul as effective as the reincarnation martial spirit? If Shurian could just ignore bottlenecks, with the mystery martial spirit in his body, he could go all the way to enter the true God realm. His heart was stirred up. Shurian's eyes couldn't help but shoot out burning lights. "It seems you are very clear about the benefits of the pure God soul." Laoli faintly smiled, poured another bowl of wine for Shurian, while he also helped himself with a big bowl of wine, and then said, "Frankly speaking, the purpose that people enter this dark magnetic noxious mist is for the pure God soul and the secret treasures." Shurian quaffed his bowl of wine, quietly nodded as he finally understood why warriors of divine land were not afraid of dangers or fatal incidents and still entered the dark magnetic noxious mist. "Thank you for telling me so many secrets." Shurian revealed a faint smile, looked at the bowl in his hand and continued, "Also for your wine." Laoli nodded, looked at him with a friendly and bright smile. "Well, we should not keep talking. We don't have too much time. We can continue ahead. Ha ha ha. If you want a drink, you can tell me at any time. My storage ring contains only good wine, enough for us to drink for a long time." Shurian laughed out loud and thanked him. Not long after that, Ayaya flew over from behind the mountain. She was surprised looking at Shurian and Laoli, seeming not to understand why these two people were staying at the same place. However, she didn't say anything, just looked at everyone, nodded and said, "Have you guys finished your restoration?" Kai and Laoli nodded. Ayaya glanced at Shurian and then took out the compass, identified the direction again, and continued to fly away. Everyone else followed her immediately. Shurian continued to stay behind Ayaya, both on alert to any movements around and on watching Aya's small waist, her beautiful thighs, and her round rear end. In the dark magnetic noxious mist, there was no concept of time. Thus, Shurian didn't know how long he had been traveling with these 5 warriors. Ayaya was leading the way. Once she detected exceptions, she would give Shurian a signal with her eyes, asking him to go forward to explore. Every time Shurian found beasts and escaped their attacks, Ayaya quickly dashed forward and slaughtered the beasts. Laoli and Kai, who were not far behind, would also instantly rush and join the battlefield. This time, Shurian joined the fight. He jumped into the fight, and together with the other 5, he had killed quite a big number of beasts. He had finally taken 5 demon crystals. In the battle, Shurian always hid his real strength and had never released all of his forces nor passed the Rampage realm. He just used the strength of an ordinary second sky of Rampage warrior to fight against the beasts. Therefore, his harvest was obviously the least. His restoration then consumed all of the demon crystals that he had gotten from the fight. Watching the beasts and observing the others' strength, he now knew better about their complicated relationship. Aya was quite cold toward him and rarely talked to him. On the contrary, Borg and the brothers Lowley always took an opportunity to speak with him a few words about the thrill of fighting and the mysteries in the dark magnetic noxious mist. Gradually, his relationship with Borg and the two brothers Lowley was quite close, while the relationship between him and Aya seemed to get worse. Aya didn't feel happy when she saw Shurian hanging out with Borg and Lowley so often, and thus the time she talked to him was less and less. Every time they encountered the beasts, she didn't warn him anymore, as if she was tired of him and wanted him to die sooner. However, every time he confronted the beast's besiege, he always escaped. Not once had he fallen into a desperate situation. Whenever danger passed, the five people assumed that he was fortunate and gradually let down their guard against the second sky of Nirvana realm Kiddo, as they thought that even if he had wicked intentions, he would not be able to execute them. This was exactly what Shurian had wanted. He was like a phantom, coldly looking at his prey, staying hidden, and quietly waiting for an opportunity. Today, Aya stopped again. The hand of the compass in her hand pointed to a floating deserted island, indicating that Shurian should go over there to see what was lurking. Shurian nodded and flew over carefully without saying a word. This was the first time he saw a small floating island in the dark magnetic noxious mist. It looked like a mountain, which was not affected by gravity, floating in the void miraculously. The island was small. There were plants and flowers on the island, but no trace of beasts could be found. Shurian attentively observed and searched around. He gradually moved to a clear water lake and suddenly heard the voices of some warriors speaking. A thought flashed up in Shurian's mind. He stayed hidden while quietly moving forward to observe them. 3 warriors with their bare upper bodies were washing the blood off their bodies. They were all males. One of them was in the second sky of Nirvana realm. The other 2 had the first sky of Nirvana realm. There were 2 corpses on the grass which were not far away from the lake. The auras of these 2 corpses had completely disappeared, as they might have been dead for quite a long time. Shurian hid in the dark, quietly observed them for a while, and then returned without making a sound. Not long after, he stopped in front of Aya and said with a frown, 3 human warriors, one of them is in the second sky of Nirvana realm, and the other 2 are in first sky of Nirvana realm. They have united and killed 2 warriors, and now they are washing the blood off in the lake. There is a lake? Aya exclaimed with astonishment. Shurian nodded. Aya was a little excited. She suddenly flew away with incredible speed. The other people also rushed to him. Borg raised his voice. What did you see there? 3 warriors. One is in the second sky of Nirvana realm, and the other 2 are in first sky of Nirvana realm. They are washing the blood off their bodies in a lake, Shurian replied. They suddenly burst into laughter while their eyes flashed a ruthless light. Kai also said with a charming smile, finally, I can take a bath. The 4 of them flew toward the small island in a hurry. Chapter 369, The Lake. Chapter 369, The Lake. The group Aya and Kai darted straight to the small island. Borg, Lowley, Laoluan, and Kai wore ruthless looks on their faces and released murderous auras. They obviously didn't have good intentions. Shurian was lagging behind. However, he was not in a hurry. He could hear the noise of the battle coming from the small island while he was walking over with a moderate speed and a comfortable look. When he came to the lake, he saw the 3 warriors had already stopped breathing. The 5 of them were surrounding the 3 dead bodies, carefully searching their bodies, and took out the storage ring from their fingers. Aya checked the body of the second sky of Nirvana realm warrior. Kai and Borg checked one of the first sky of Nirvana realm warriors. The brothers Laoluan were searching the last one. The 5 of them carefully flipped the corpses as if they didn't want to miss any precious treasures. Shurian walked over, but kept a distance with the 5 of them and didn't say a word. A flow of auras from the 3 dead bodies flew toward him, quietly penetrating his acupuncture points, making his spirit comfortable. He didn't struggle for credit nor spoils. He didn't need to take action either. The auras of those 3 warriors were more precious to him than the demon crystals in their storage rings. In the dark magnetic noxious mist, profound chi was the most valuable and essential element. If he released his strength to fight with these 3 Nirvana realm warriors, he believed that they would have had no chance of surviving. However, to kill these 3 people, he would have to consume a significant amount of his forces, and the most important thing was he would probably reveal his real strength. It was not something he wanted. Without having wasted any profound chi, he still had harvested the auras of these 3 warriors. No matter what people thought about this, it was the most cost-effective benefit that he could have. Watching the 5 people searching the dead bodies while feeling the auras pouring into his body, Shurian was quite joyful. It was at this moment that he really believed in Borg's words. Aya was not a good person indeed. Before, this girl hadn't killed him, but she had even offered him a piece of demon crystal, which was clearly unreasonable. In connection with what Borg had told him, he believed that Aya indeed originally had another plan. In the eyes of such people like Aya and Kai, the Endless Sea was just a barbaric land, and thus, the warriors of the Endless Sea were useless in the dark magnetic noxious mist as they didn't have any precious treasures. That was the reason why they didn't want to waste their profound chi to kill him. However, this time was different. There was more than one warrior. Moreover, they had just killed the other 2 warriors next to the lake, so it was obvious that they had killed to steal. In the eyes of Aya and Kai, these 3 people were worth consideration. Therefore, they had to die. The group of Aya, Kai, and the other 3 carefully searched for a while. The 2 brothers loudly slightly chuckled, displayed a happy face as they seemed to be satisfied with the harvest. Aya's and Tsai's faces remained normal. Thus, Shurian guessed they didn't get a good fortune. Borg cursed under his breath as he didn't seem to harvest anything valuable. As Kai and Borg were on the same team, Shurian still could guess that they didn't harvest much through Borg's curses, although Tsai's face didn't change. After a long while observing, he had already absorbed all of the auras from the 3 warriors. Shurian secretly sensed the movements inside his acupuncture points and felt assured after having been certain that the auras of these 3 warriors were still within his body's capacity. He then continued looking at the 5 people. Shurian, bring these corpses away from here. It is not easy to find a lake. We have to take a bath. Kai smiled sweetly looking at him, asking him to handle the corpses. Aya frowned while her eyes slightly brightened up. She seemed to have the intention of taking a bath as well. Women naturally loved cleanliness, especially those who were exceptionally beautiful like Aya and Kai. If they were not in the dark magnetic noxious mist, these 2 girls would have bathed themselves and taken care of their appearance every day. And now, as there was a lake here, it was no wonder why both of them were excited. Okay. Shurian beamed a faint smile, obediently walked over, took the 3 bloody corpses, and quickly flew away. The corpses, whose auras had completely been drained by Shurian, would soon dehydrate and shrivel. He had just thought of how to cover this situation, and thus, what Kai asked him to do was exactly what he needed right now. So, he was very pleased to do this task. Kai was satisfied with Shurian's hard work. After he had left, she revealed a sweet smile and said, having a person in the team who will die for us in danger at critical times and take care of miscellaneous things at other times is not bad. While talking, Kai looked toward Aya but didn't catch any reaction from her. She coldly snorted inside her heart, staring at Borg, then indifferently looked at Laoluin and said, we girls want to take a bath. Should you 3 guys go away? The 2 brothers loudly brightly smiled, nodded, and walked away. Borg was a little bit stunned, couldn't help but look at Aya and ask, Sister, should you wait until profound chi is restored and then wash up? It has been a long time since I have taken a bath. Finding a clean lake is hard. I can't wait anymore. After talking, Kai threw a glance at Aya, smiled and said, Aya, do you want to wait? Aya nodded indifferently, coldly looked at Borg with a frown and said, You are not going to wash up yet? Borg bowed his head, secretly cursed, turned around, and left. Shurian dragged the 3 dead bodies to a remote mountain quite far away from the lake. After having thrown these 5 bodies aside, he sat down, feeling the refining process inside his acupuncture points. After having entered the second sky of Nirvana realm, the auras of the warriors who had the same level as his were not vigorous for him anymore. The time the mystery martial spirit took to purify it was not too long. When he had still been in the Hengluo Sea, he had killed quite a number of Nirvana realm warriors. Thus, he understood well about the purification time that the mystery martial spirit required. He knew that the auras of those 3 dead warriors would be purified completely after 1 or 2 hours maximum. He believed that the negative emotions that had been dragged along with their auras would not affect his mind and push him into a violent situation. Because of this self-confidence, he was not in a hurry but waited in silence instead. Half an hour later, the screams of Borg and the 2 brothers Laoli suddenly came up from the lake. Shurian frowned, stood up with suspicion, and quickly flew over. Not long after that, when he arrived at the lake, he saw the 3 people Borg, Laoli, and Laoluin walking around the lake. Borg was still shouting, "Sister?" The 2 brothers Laoli and Laoluin knitted their eyebrows and hurriedly asked when they saw Shurian, "Have you seen Ayaya and Kai?" Shurian shook his head with surprise. "Aren't they washing up in the lake? What happened? They have gone missing?" "Half an hour already." Borg spoke up with a gloomy face. "I had been waiting for her for a while, so I didn't feel right and went to the lake to call her. But she didn't respond. I am worried that she might have been in some accident. However, after checking around the lake, I couldn't find my sister or Ayaya." "How could it be?" Shurian continued with a surprised look on his face. "I just threw the 5 corpses away and was resting a bit, but I didn't see anyone coming or leaving. Ayaya and Kai certainly didn't go in my direction." Borg's face changed. He said, "Except for your direction, we have searched all other directions. Have they possibly left the island?" "Impossible." Laoli and Laoluin shook their heads simultaneously. "They just took a bath in the lake. Since they disappeared strangely, could they be under the water?" Shurian pointed to the lake. Borg, Laoli, and Laoluin were all startled, rolled their eyes looking at the clear lake, and suddenly felt a little uneasy. None of them moved. They were in a daze for a while, and then looked at him. Shurian cursed inside his heart. He had soon known that although these 3 people looked friendly with him, they all had their purposes. Obviously, as they were aware that Aya's and Tsai's missing case should be somehow related to this lake, they all were afraid of the lake, and thus they didn't dare to search it. Faintly sneering, Shurian didn't show emotion on his face, pretended not to see their eyes, and walked to the lake. He frowned and squatted down, reached out his left hand toward the lake to see if there was anything abnormal inside it. Although Borg, Laoli, and Laoluin were in the second sky of Nirvana realm, he was not afraid of them. He wanted to see the lake's abnormality first, and he then would decide if he should go back and kill those 3 people or enter the lake to check. He slowly stretched his hand into the lake, quietly searched for the abnormal fluctuations under the lake. Suddenly, a huge force came from the depth of the lake. This force was so powerful that Shurian's face changed instantly. He wanted to retract his hand, but it was too late. It was as if there was a certain kind of demon under the lake pulling his arm and dragging him into the water. Splash! A trace of horror appeared on Shurian's face when he fell into the lake and quickly disappeared without leaving any trace. Chapter 370. Underwater Beauty. Chapter 370. Underwater Beauty. The lake was calm without any ripples, but Shurian had disappeared without a trace. Borg, Laoli, and Laoluin had seen the horror flash on his face when he had fallen into the water. Shurian had disappeared, but the lake remained so clear that the bottom of the lake could still be seen as before. The 3 of them looked at the bottom of the lake, but didn't find even the slightest abnormality. It was like there was some force that existed in the lake, and the water that they saw was just a deception. Only after entering it would one know how dangerous it was. Borg, Laoli, and Laoluin were frightened. Watching the lake in silence, not daring to act recklessly. The fact that Shurian had been suddenly pulled into the lake made the three of them imagine the scene where Aya and Kai had disappeared. Both Aya and Kai had Sky Spirit Realm cultivation base, but even so, they could not return after having fallen into this lake. Therefore, the three of them guessed that the two girls were highly likely to encounter dangers. The three of them exchanged looks and saw fear in each other's eyes. They stood motionlessly next to the lake without doing anything. Borg hesitated for a long while, and then made up his mind. He decided to plunge into the lake to check what was there under the water. "Wait a little more," Lowly suddenly shouted in fear. "Half a day later, if they don't return, we should leave." Borg's face changed. Under the scrutinizing look of the two brothers Lowly and Laoluin, he nodded slightly. In the lake, many tentacles as big as human arms wrapped around Shurian, pulling him into the bottom of the lake with an incredibly powerful force. From the shore, the bottom of the lake was so clear that he could see it very clearly. However, the depth was beyond his imagination. He was terrified feeling himself being pulled to the bottom of this endless, deep lake. Inky black tentacles, which looked like 100-meter-long pythons, tightly entangled him and dragged him straight down to the bottom. These tentacles were covered with strange patterns twisting and dancing around in the lake, tightly wrapping Shurian's body. Under the gloomy water, a pitch-black monster was moving, stretching its 1,000-meter-long tentacles. Two snow-white bodies were also wrapped around those tentacles. They were struggling violently, trying to break the bounds of these ruthless tentacles to float to the surface of the lake. They were Aya and Kai. These two were mesmerizingly beautiful girls. Right now, they were totally naked, vaguely exposing their white skin, towering breasts, and slender limbs. Black tentacles wrapped around their snow-white bodies, pressed their ample bosom and round buttocks, exaggerating their appealing curves. That made a strange and spectacular scene under the water. Shurian opened his eyes widely, staring at the two girls. These two girls had apparently been taking a bath in the lake and then had encountered a sudden attack from this monster, being pulled down into the bottom of the lake. At this moment, their entire bodies were revealed. The two red points on their firm breasts quivered, fragrant grass on their abdomens fluttered, making Shurian's eyes pop out. Those two white bodies were covered with many black tentacles of that monster. Black and white mixed disorderly, which dazzled Shurian's eyes. This kind of strange beauty was very attractive. Even when being in danger like this, Shurian still felt excited. The two girls' bosoms were gorgeous when they were tightly bound, giving Shurian a feeling of resentment as he couldn't storm forward to ravage them. Both Aya and Kai were in the sky realm, but they couldn't move their bodies or hands as the tentacles were entangling them tightly. Shurian looked at them mesmerizingly while flames violently burned up in his eyes. He felt evil fires emerge on his belly and hardly stopped. Especially Kai. Her beautiful legs were forcefully separated under the tentacles' entanglement. Fresh grass and fragrant flowers were completely revealed, which could turn any man into a wild beast. Too stimulated, Shurian's eyes stared at her, not seeming to know that death was near. Negative feelings overflowed from his acupuncture points, while his veins bulged prominently. Kai was struggling with the tentacles wrapping around her body using the knives that emerged from the rings on her arms and legs. She suddenly raised her head and saw Shurian sinking. She saw Shurian's burning eyes like those of a wild beast. Kai was extremely embarrassed to the point that she almost fainted in shame while her beautiful eyes turned white. She had never expected that Shurian would suddenly appear out of nowhere in this situation and see her entire naked body. Even her most secret, forbidden privates could not escape his eyes. Although Shurian was dozens of meters away from Kai, he could still see her face glowing red and her arrogant eyes staring at Shurian fiercely. She seemed to be resenting the fact that she could not kill him. Under her furious gaze, Shurian seemed to wake from the influence of the negative feelings while his eyes slowly calmed down. He then put the concentration on the monster below. It was a strange octopus as big as a mountain. This octopus was as black as ink, had countless tentacles, and a big, blood pool mouth full of fangs. Its green-gray eyes flashed up with horrifying lights. Shurian had never seen this kind of monster before, so he didn't know which level it was. However, if it could entangle Aya and Kai like this, it was not just a 6th-level beast. As this giant monster had numerous tentacles and was also familiar with the environment at the bottom of the lake, it could comfortably cast out all its strength. This monster was not easy to deal with. After throwing a quick glance, Shurian was chilled, and his face suddenly changed. He started to struggle, wanting to get rid of these ruthless tentacles. This octopus seemed to want to devour all 3 of them. As long as it opened its mouth, Shurian believed that no one could stand it once falling into that blood pool mouth full of fangs like sharp daggers. Perhaps, with his sturdy body, he could fight against it a little bit. However, Kai and Aya would surely die, no doubt. They were both beautiful girls, apparently not the kind of warrior who had gone through arduous body cultivation. If those sharp fangs speared into their soft, white bodies, they would be utterly divided. Strange and bright lights suddenly shot out from Aya's 10 fingers, broke and destroyed those tentacles that were wrapping around her. One of the tentacles was cut off into 3 parts. However, this octopus had countless tentacles. The number of the ones that were swathing her body was more than 10 already. Although she had cut off one of them, it didn't change anything. On the contrary, more tentacles were reaching out and tightly coiling her arms, constraining her arm movements and stretching them at the same time. Next to her were more than 10 tentacles that had been cut off. However, not a single drop of blood dripped out from them. Instead, they slowly crawled and connected, and finally restored themselves like new. Aya struggled. Her appealing body shook while her big bosoms prominently protruded under the tentacle's entanglement. The 2 pinky red points on her breasts were even more mesmerizing. The tentacles wrapped her 2 beautiful legs together. Shurian could see not only her belly, but also the gully within the wonderful place of hers. Aya apparently saw Shurian coming as well. When she saw Shurian's burning eyes looking at her, her body suddenly emitted bone-chilling power like an ice-cold sharp sword darting into his eyes. Trying to twist her body, Aya tried her best to turn her body to hide her breasts and her privates, showing her back to Shurian. However, she then revealed her buttocks, which swelled visibly under the tentacle's bind. Shurian's eyes brightened blazingly, greedily looking at the round rear end which now looked like 2 mountains. He sneered and felt overjoyed. Neither Kai or Aya considered him a partner. They just treated him like a cannon fodder, never putting his life in their eyes. In their hearts, he might be just a fool for them to play around with who would be their sacrifice at any time. Shurian understood it very well. Therefore, he kept looking at the 2 girls' bodies without fear or embarrassment. As long as there was a chance, he would follow his instinct regardless of the fact that they could find him to take revenge later. Aya and Kai kept struggling against those tentacles. After all, these 2 girls had Sky Realm cultivation base and hence, that octopus could not drag both of them into its furious mouth even though it was mighty. Shurian was different, because he didn't use his real force and just showed the strength of a second sky of Nirvana realm. He was pulled closer and closer to the octopus's mouth. While struggling against the octopus's entanglement, Aya and Kai still realized that Shurian couldn't resist the monster's strength. However, these 2 girls didn't reveal even the slightest mercy. They seemed to be glad when seeing the octopus be about to devour Shurian. Shurian had seen their privates, which made both of them extremely embarrassed. They resented not killing Shurian earlier as only his death could help them forget this shame and consider that it had never happened before. Although his body was being dragged along, Shurian still raised his head, sharply looking at the 2 girls, realizing the evil feeling in their eyes. He sneered inside his heart. When he was about 10 meters away from the octopus, his eyes chilled up while he started to trigger his hidden strength. Chapter 371, Bursting Attack. Chapter 371, Bursting Attack. His mind was slightly triggered as 720 acupuncture points in his body suddenly became tense while raging negative force abruptly flowed out from his acupuncture points. The first sky of rampage. Feeling the horrendous negative power overflowing, Shurian's body muscles suddenly became taut. A tremendous strength spewed out from his shaking muscle fibers. In just a blink, Shurian's force had soared several times. The inky black tentacles daringly rushed toward him, entangled him, and pulled him straight to that weird octopus's huge, dark mouth with skyrocketing force. However, his sinking body suddenly stopped at the bottom of the lake. No matter how much strength that octopus was using, Shurian was like a 10,000-year stagnant rock under the water, impossible to move. In Shurian's cold eyes, a ferocious beam of light zoomed over right on the octopus' enormous mouth. He slowly concentrated his mighty power inside his body, not taking actions hastily, only staring at the octopus's huge mouth. It looked like he was hesitating. Zhang above his head. A trace of surprise appeared in Aya's and Tsai's eyes. They looked at Shurian full of suspicion, not knowing why his sinking body had suddenly stopped. They both had the Sky Realm cultivation base, and their full powers were considered to be equivalent to that of the octopus. Meanwhile, Shurian only had the second Sky of Nirvana Realm. How could he have such tremendous strength? Naina and Kai blankly looked at Shurian, who was now motionless near the octopus's mouth. Their faces were filled with shock and doubt. The two of them would never believe that Shurian, who was only in the second Sky of Nirvana Realm, could have the strength that was comparable to theirs. While the two girls were still puzzled, his body slowly sank again. Fear in their eyes seemed to fade away. They secretly let out a sigh of relief and felt that Shurian's earlier abnormality might be just because of the octopus's adjustment. After it had adjusted, everything returned to normal. The octopus was indeed adjusting itself. This monster was surprisingly wise. Every one of its tentacles was very abnormally sensitive. As soon as Shurian's hidden strength had burst out, it immediately felt the aggressive power from Shurian's body. This vigorous strength of his clearly surpassed those of Aya and Kai. Hence, as the octopus could feel something wrong, it then concentrated more of its power on Shurian's body to reinforce the power of its tentacles and bind Shurian more tightly in order to strangle him to death first. Originally, the octopus had wanted to increase its power on Aya and Kai, but it then retrieved that part of its power back and transferred it along those black tentacles all the way to Shurian. Shurian was immediately aware of the entanglement of those tentacles all over his body. With his unchanged face, Shurian sneered coldly and calculated a plan. Not only did he not struggle tenaciously, but he also suspended a burst of his strength. Under the pull of those tentacles, his body slowly sank to the octopus's mouth. At this time, he couldn't help but look at Aya and Kai above his head, seeing them let out a sigh of relief. They want me to die? The resentment in his heart got deeper as he was calculating discreetly. The distance from the octopus' huge, gloomy mouth was getting closer and closer. The two girls, Aya and Kai, seemed to relax a little bit when seeing the octopus about to swallow him into its belly. The beauty of their privates couldn't escape Shurian's sharp eyes. There were not any secret places on their bodies that Shurian didn't know. Everything had been revealed in front of his eyes. As for Aya and Kai, the fact that a stranger had seen their graceful bodies was unacceptable. Even if the octopus couldn't kill Shurian, they would keep the idea of killing him and destroy him afterward. Otherwise, Shurian's existence would be a knot that never dissolved in their hearts that could probably affect their state of mind in the future, as well as their realm breakthroughs. The two girls happily watched Shurian's imminent death and secretly planned that when the octopus was busy devouring Shurian, they would take this chance to escape the lake. With that thought, Aya and Kai paid more attention to Shurian's every move. Their beautiful eyes were glued to Shurian's body without a blink, watching him moving closer to the octopus's huge mouth and quietly waiting for their opportunity. Shurian's eyes were as cold as ice. The corner of his mouth curved up, displaying his ruthlessness. He stopped looking at Aya and Kai above his head, but stared at the octopus's enormous mouth, which was coming closer and closer. He could even smell the stink from its mouth. Fierce sword-like fangs flashed up with terrifying, chilling lights. Those fangs contained poison, and the stench from the octopus's mouth, which also had powerful toxins, violently struck his nostrils. Ordinary people, once they fell into that mouth, would be paralyzed by the toxins and become flabby. Then, the octopus would take the opportunity to crush and devour them. Shurien sneered coldly inside his heart while looking at that huge mouth and was secretly on alert and well-prepared. When he was around 5 meters away, the octopus's mouth opened, showing dense fangs that looked like 2 rows of wind blades, waiting for him to enter. Shurien was still resisting the tentacles with all of his strength. However, his body suddenly loosened. Shurien's resistance abruptly disappeared. Thus, under the tentacle's aggressive pull, his body darted out like an arrow and instantly went into its giant mouth. The octopus's tentacles wrapping around Shurien instantly let go right at the moment he fell into the stinky mouth. At the same time, the octopus immediately closed his mouth, ready to push the venom into Shurien and chew him. Aya's and Sai's countenance enlightened when the giant mouth of the octopus closed. They started to put forth their strength and use all of their techniques as well as secret treasures to get out of the tentacles. Many beams of lights bloomed out from the 2 girls' graceful bodies and instantly cut off those tentacles, which were aggressively wrapping around them. However, more and more tentacles quickly flew over from below and bound the 2 of them again. Aya and Kai gritted their teeth, urging all kinds of techniques and Upanishads to the most while strange lights continuously flashed up around them. A terrifying bunch of lights flew next to the 2 girls' white bodies, continually resisting the octopus's tentacles. Their strength had been drained. Shurien was inside the huge mouth of the octopus, feeling the stench right up his nose. The viscid venom dripped down from the roof of the mouth, watering his entire body. He released the star shield. Inside that giant mouth, starlight dazzlingly sparked and was as thin as a mite's wing. The starlight kept flickering non-stop, giving people an unpredictable kind of a mystery, as if heaven and earth were hidden in those flashing star points of light. In the lake, when the octopus's big, black tentacles had been wrapping around him, which were an aggressive, mighty pulling force and filled with demonic power, it affected his ability to run his full strength. It was precisely because of this, he, together with Aya and Kai, could not display a defensive shield of light similar to this star shield. When he fell into the octopus's giant mouth, the tentacles were immediately retracted. At the same time, he instantly opened the star shield which he had prepared earlier, protecting his whole body before more of its venom covered his body. As soon as the star shield had formed, Shurien slightly relaxed a little bit as he watched the starlight sizzle when the venom fell on it, releasing a thin mist of smoke. Shurien's face was solemn. The venom inside the octopus's mouth was unexpectedly toxic. Even the essential power of the star shield was dissolving slowly with each drop of venom that dripped down. Before the tentacles let go of him, his body had inevitably been stained with some viscid venom. Inside the star shield, he saw the star shield fuming under the effect of the venom. He then watched the stained venom slowly making his skin decay. Shurien couldn't help but frown. A mist of smoke also rose from the skin that had been exposed to the venom. The octopus's venom was amazingly corrosive and was fighting with his 2 great martial spirits. The venom corroded his skin and flesh, making many wounds. The corrosion of the venom was blocked by a peculiar power inside his muscle fibers. After a short while, the venom disappeared without a trace. Actually, his muscle fibers had infiltrated the venom and dissolved all of it. Inside the star shield, Shurien chuckled while looking at the roof of the disgusting mouth dripping down venomous drops, feeling this enormous mouth filled with mighty powers, seeing sharp fangs like wind blades approaching quickly. His peculiar strength flowed out, and his body trembled slightly. Shurien finally took action. A fist with power that could ram mountains. A punch struck the wall of the octopus's mouth. His strike had caused a huge blood hole on the thick, dark red wall of the monster's mouth. The octopus screamed out loud. In pain, a bright red tongue-like foreign body suddenly flew out and stormed toward him. Shurien's face remained unchanged. He put all of his power to take action. He didn't perform any techniques, but just relied on the mighty power of his body bombarding all sides of its mouth. Torrential energy like a mountain avalanche burst out from Shurian's muscle fibers, and he was extremely excited. His body had enough powers to kill everything. Inside the octopus's mouth, he continually shot out horrendous strength from his body. Aya and Kai were fighting with the tentacles with their full powers, and suddenly felt that the pressure was loosened. They didn't know why those tentacles strangely twisted, shook off, and stopped wrapping around them. They were stunned as they subconsciously looked at the octopus, which was now crazily dancing and shaking on the bottom of the lake. Its tentacles were flying around while its giant body was moving wildly. It seemed to be getting torn apart from inside by some violent power. The two girls' eyes and mouths were wide open. Chapter 372. Occupying the Beauty. Chapter 372. Occupying the Beauty. Even if Aya and Kai were idiots, both of them were sure that the octopus's abnormality had something to do with Shurian. They just didn't know why Shurian hadn't been killed yet, but on the contrary, he still had the strength to make the octopus resist strenuously, while he was only in the second sky of Nirvana realm. Moreover, he was kept inside the octopus's toxic mouth. Aya and Kai couldn't figure it out. In these two girls' eyes, Shurian was only an ordinary Nirvana realm warrior and came from the Endless Sea, a barbarian land. What ability did this kind of warrior have to be able to make the thousand-hand ink octopus not able to fight back? Kai and Aya both knew that this thousand-hand ink octopus was a 7th-level beast, living in the water with tremendous strength. The corrosive power of venom from its fangs was terrifying. Moreover, thousand-hand ink octopus's tentacles all connected to its monstrous original power, and thus, once someone got entangled by those tentacles, one's defensive force was hardly performed. The thousand-hand ink octopus's killing method was to use its tentacles to wrap the opponent's body first, then pull the victim toward its huge mouth. Once the venom from its mouth touched the warrior, he would immediately weaken, and his skin and flesh would quickly be corroded. When the warrior's body was rotten and exhausted, the octopus just needed to use its fangs to tear it apart. None of the warriors in this situation could withstand it, and they soon became a blood clot and were swallowed down into its abdomen. Kai and Aya also wondered about their cultivation base level. Once falling into that octopus's mouth, if they weren't able to activate their defense light shield either, and thus, they would be rotted by the stinky venom and torn down into pieces. That was why they had to struggle harder and emit their full power to resist the pulling force of the thousand-hand ink octopus. They didn't dare to let themselves fall into that huge mouth. Therefore, when Shurian had fallen into the toxic mouth of the thousand-hand ink octopus, they had been certain that he would have died and that there was no chance for him to escape death. However, at this moment, the octopus was dancing crazily, which was obviously a masterpiece by Shurian. Shurian apparently wasn't dead, but instead, he was continuously taking action inside the thousand-hand ink octopus's mouth, making it endure pain. Aya and Kai, on one hand, were struggling to get rid of the tentacles wrapping them. On the other hand, they looked down with surprise while their hearts were full of doubt, as they suddenly felt that this guy Shurian seemed to be a little bit unusual. However, at this time, horrifying demonic power abruptly flowed out from the thousand-hand ink octopus's tentacles. It was aggressively moving its body as if its countless crazy counterattacks were finally coming. Aya and Kai understood this thousand-hand ink octopus's habits as well as its attacking method. They knew that when thousand-hand ink octopus was about to die, its demonic power would burst out through its tentacles, ruthlessly entangling creatures to death. After having used a big amount of demonic power, thousand-hand ink octopus was greatly exhausted. If it weren't this critical, dangerous time, thousand-hand ink octopus would not have done so. Kai and Aya wore a frightened look, feeling the force of the tentacles around them. Their countenance finally changed. They forcefully struggled, using all of their techniques and secret treasures to cut off those tentacles that were wrapping around their soft, snow-white bodies. Aya was even better. Besides her exquisite cultivation base, her storage ring suddenly flashed up with a strange beam of light. Countless ice-like white light bloomed out densely. At the same time, She immediately cast out broken blades. Each pointed blade appeared sparklingly, then cut off more than half of the black tentacles, and also condensed her body strength to prepare in case of this octopus's sneaky attacks. Kai also knew that the thousand-hand ink octopus's attack this time would be extremely sharp. She knew that it was impossible to cut off a majority of the tentacles in such a short time. Boom, boom, boom. The tremendous power like a mountain avalanche broke out from the two girls' bodies. The tentacles that were wrapping around them burst out all of a sudden. Torrential demonic power crazily stormed toward their graceful bodies, seemingly wanting to destroy their defensive forces. Tsui, Aya, and Kai spurted out a mouthful of blood simultaneously. The light in their eyes dimmed. Their snow-white bodies were stained blood that burst out from the thousand-hand ink octopus's tentacles. Aya spewed out a mouthful of blood and instantly saw other tentacles spreading over from the bottom, twisting, and once again wrapping her up. This thousand-hand ink octopus apparently hadn't given up yet. It was about to destroy all the creatures in the water. Her face changed again and again. She fearfully looked at the crazy octopus and, without overthinking, put forth all of her strength to fly up to the surface of the lake like a beam of light, piercing through layer upon layer of the lake illusion, quickly getting out of this peculiar lake. Kai also spurted out a mouthful of blood while her power, as well as her profound chi, seemed to be reacting a little chaotically. Before she could organize her forces, the thousand-hand ink octopus's tentacles had already spread toward her body again. It didn't let her flee, and once again bound her snow-white body. Another intimidating demonic power burst out. The thousand-hand ink octopus's tentacles on her body blasted. Raging demonic power rushed forward, destroying her defensive forces, instantly making her unconscious. Tsai's soft, white body was drifting in the water, slowly sinking, no longer able to fight against the thousand-hand ink octopus's tentacles. At this moment, thousand-hand ink octopus was growling and screeching crazily in the lake. Sharp, weird sounds came up and spread in the water. The lake suddenly boiled up with huge bubbles. That thousand-hand ink octopus wiggled its body even more crazily but quickly weakened. Many blood holes suddenly appeared in its strange head. When those blood holes broke, the water instantly poured in and filled its brain. The thousand-hand ink octopus was gradually exhausted, although it still wanted to gather its strength. Its black tentacles hovered around without any power. Shurian was in the thousand-hand ink octopus's brain, continually releasing his violent body strength. Under the first sky of rampage, and with the help of the hidden strange power inside his muscles, he transported his profound chi and launched powerful blows without using any of his techniques. The brain of this Thean Thursday Mak Chuanggu was smashed down and splashed everywhere. As the brain was destroyed, even if the thousand-hand ink octopus was very dangerous, it hardly blocked Shurian's violent attacks. It gradually no longer resisted and slowly began to sink. Inside the crushed brain, Shurian continued destroying everything wantonly like a brutal beast. His hands and feet stirred up this brain with immense force. A fist-sized demon crystal gradually emerged at a corner of that crumbled brain, flashing up with strange black lights. Shurian burst into laughter. One of his hands clenched the demon crystal tightly while he was activating the negative forces which were used for the Death Seal's condensation to take out the demon crystal from the site. A destructive power was launched, and the octopus's life was completely ended by his strike. It no longer had taken a breath, and thus the sinking speed quickened. Like a sharp sword, Shurian flew out from a blood hole on the thousand-hand ink octopus's head and reappeared on the bottom of the lake, feeling very happy and satisfied as he had reaped a large harvest. A 7th-level demon crystal was extremely precious in the dark magnetic noxious mist. With this demon crystal, even if his profound chi had been consumed entirely, he could completely restore it. After the demon crystal fell into the storage ring, Shurian quietly suspended in the water, watching that thousand-hand ink octopus slowly sink to the bottom of the lake with a cheerful face. A slender, snow-white body suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. He raised his head up and realized that Kai was totally naked with a pale face and was gradually sinking to the bottom of the lake. Shurian stared at Kai with a cold face, revealed a chilling sneer at the corner of his mouth, and quickly zoomed over to her like a fish. Chapter 373, Punishment. Chapter 373, Punishment. Mysterious power moved toward and penetrated the ancient profound chi tree, which contained vigorous forces, making it sparkling and crystal clear. Shurian closed his eyes, feeling the changes of the ancient profound chi tree. He was joyful as he knew that with his vigorous profound chi, together with the comprehension of his state of mind, he could break through the third sky of Nirvana realm, making him one step further. Entering the dark magnetic noxious mist this time, his main purpose was to temper himself with the fastest speed to enhance his cultivation base. When he returned to the Endless Sea later, he would take revenge on the demon tribes and those forces which had wanted to obliterate him. Linda's and Xia Shunchuan's deaths had made him quickly realize that only having a mighty strength could facilitate him in doing whatever he wanted in this world instead of being someone else's stepping stone. The transformation of the profound halo made him very happy as he was one step closer to his goal. At this time, the chaotic power in Tsai's body gradually calmed down and regained its normal state. Her eyelashes flickered slightly. She then woke up from being unconscious. As soon as Tsai's eyes opened, she saw Shurian's cold face with his eyes closed. Kai subconsciously wanted to shout, but she immediately remembered the incident earlier and thus quickly suppressed her emotions. Instead, she stayed calm and considered the situation. She was lying naked on Shurian's muscular thighs. Shurian's big hands were still caressing back and forth over her sensitive back and buttocks. While Shurian's hands were moving, Kai could feel an electric current zooming over her back, making her feel shameful, like she had never been so humiliated in her life. Seeing Shurian meditating with his eyes closed and feeling his hands caressing her body, Kai wanted to breathe out fire and could hardly restrain her anger. Thus, she secretly gathered her power. Then suddenly her jade-like pair of arms went straight for Shurian's chest. Disintegration variation. Kai let out a shout. The halos with yellow and red colors flowed out from the center of her palms. The two strange lights burst out, forming a robust power that darted straight to Shurian's chest. His powerful strength burst out from his chest. Hundreds of different red and yellow lights instantly penetrated Shurian's chest as if they wanted to tear his lungs and heart apart. Boom! An explosive sound came up. Shurian's back hit the hard stone wall with a thud, making rubble fall everywhere. This incident caused the stone cave to burst open. A block of stone from above his head fell hard. Kai took this chance to take action like a female beast with resentful eyes. Many rings from her snow-white arm flew out instantly. She looked like she wanted to annihilate him for good. While experiencing and observing the mutation of the ancient profound chi tree, Shurian was suddenly ambushed by Kai, which caused pain on his chest. The strange power inside the muscle fibers on his chest thus burst out, and his petrifaction martial spirit reached its supreme. At the moment when Kai launched her violent attack, Shurian's skin became purple, and his extremely strong defensive force had blocked her strike. Hundreds of yellow and red powers flowed into Shurian's chest and were instantly entangled by the mysterious power in his muscle fibers. Those yellow and red powers could not penetrate the strong muscles on his chest to crush his heart and lungs. Shurian's body shook violently. He suddenly woke up and threw a cold glance at Kai. He suddenly sneered and didn't care about Tsai's next attack. Instead, he urged the electric shift and fiercely jumped on Tsai's body. Boom! Kai stood up and swung her snow-white arm, and the rings on her arm strongly clinked together. Before she could launch her next attack, Shurian had already knocked her out to the lake. Shurian sneered with a cold face as he rushed out and moved next to Kai, who had just fallen into the water. He stretched his left hand, grabbing her snow-white neck while the other hand held her body and then brought her back into the stone cave. Shurian's counterattack was exceptionally ferocious. His violent force burst out from his muscle fibers. After the petrifaction martial spirit had reached its supreme state, his body became the most horrible of weapons. He didn't even need to transport his profound chi. He just relied on the bursting force of his sturdy body to deal with Tsai's attacks. When Kai had been under the water, she had been severely injured by the thousand-hand ink octopus, and her profound chi had been consumed. Thus, together with being unconscious earlier, her strength had been reduced significantly. Moreover, she was not good at hand-to-hand combat, and thus, launching a sneak attack on Shurian in that small stone cave was not a smart move. With her white neck being buckled in Shurian's left hand, Tsai's eyes were full of fear. She wanted to scream out loud but realized that her throat was being blocked, and she couldn't let out a single sound. Just like that, with Shurian's hand strangling her neck, Tsai's heart quickly sank. A terrible burst of power transmitted from his left arm which frightened her mind. She knew that if she made another move, Shurian would clench his fingers tightly, crushing her neck. Therefore, Kai was in shock as she watched Shurian in silence. She didn't dare to make the slightest move while the rings on her arm continued to tremble and finally subsided without acting recklessly. Shurian carried her and sat down again in the stone cave. His eyes burned, staring at her mesmerizing, beautiful naked body. The corner of his mouth moved slightly, a trace of lust glimmering in his eyes. Kai was panicked. Her beautiful eyes looked at Shurian sharply as she didn't know what he wanted to do. Shurian didn't say a word. His hand held her neck, carrying her up into the air. He coldly looked at her and considered thoughtfully. He originally wanted to use a ruthless whack on Kai, killing her to steal the demon crystal in her storage ring. After that, he would leave this lake and meet the other people of Ayaya, Borg, and the two brothers Lowly. However, he thought over it again. Right now, as his profound chi had already recovered and reached its supreme, if he killed Kai, he could have some mysterious power to add to his martial arts, but not much, and thus killing her was somehow a waste. In addition, if Kai died in the lake while he was able to get out of the lake alive, the other people would guess his true ability and thus would consider him an enemy and be aware of him much more than before. A 7th-level demon crystal was exceptionally precious in their eyes. If Kai died, he would become their target. If Ayaya, Borg, Lowly, and Laoluan united, he was not sure if he could win. The most important thing was that he was not familiar with the dark magnetic noxious mist. He still wanted to borrow these people's abilities to discover more of its mysteries. Thus, before he understood everything about this dark magnetic noxious mist, he didn't want these 4 people turning their backs on him. If Kai didn't die or was under his control, he could still hide his true strength. By putting Thean Thursday Mak Chuang-gu's death on Tsai's hands, he could have Kai restrain Ayaya and know more about the dark magnetic noxious mist mysteries and the Divine Lands situation through Kai. With that thought, Shurian finally had his calculation. His cold eyes and Tsai's horrified eyes met. Shurian let out a low shout, and the third eye inside the sea of consciousness of his host's soul opened. A beam of light flashed up. He then poured his soul consciousness into this beam of light and carefully instructed it to infiltrate Tsai's head. "Let go of your sea of consciousness, or else I will kill you." Shurian coldly looked at Kai and intimidated her. Kai was terrified at heart. Her beautiful eyes filled with fear. She kept shaking her head as she wanted to refuse. "If you refuse, I will kill you. But if you accept, I will only leave a mark on your host's soul. As long as you obey me from now until my business in this dark magnetic noxious mist ends, I will remove this soul barrier for you." Shurian was like a devil using both intimidation and enticement at the same time. At this moment, Kai looked at Shurian with deep fear inside her heart. She finally understood that Shurian, whom she hadn't even laid her eyes on before, was the most thoughtful one in the group. He had hidden his true strength and had evil ambition without any human emotions from the beginning. Right now, she could only see Shurian's brutal face, but didn't think that she had been involved in his calculation from the beginning. She could only remember that she was resentful the thousand-hand ink octopus hadn't killed him when they were under the water, and she had also tried to take his life earlier. Just remembering someone else's fierceness, but finding it impossible to see one's own wickedness was common in the human world, and Kai was not an exception. "I'll count to 3. 1, 2. Shurian's face looked cold and cruel, showing a trace of impatience. He started to count without waiting for Kai to respond. Kai kept looking at Shiyin, and now she was certain that Shiyin was a ruthless person, not a soft-hearted one. Hence, Kai instantly nodded her head before Shiyin finished counting. She finally let go of her sea of consciousness to let Shiyin's soul consciousness in. In the soul consciousness, although Shiyin was only in the nirvana realm, his soul cultivation was much more than that of an ordinary sky realm. Different kinds of spirit Upanishads of demonic sound clan were all profound. In that abandoned land, he had used the group of Panja to carry out his soul experiments. This time, his host soul and the 9 serenities soul-devouring flame now gathered in one place, and thus doing this was somehow like once a thief, always a thief. After his soul consciousness had entered Sai's head, he made use of the demonic sound clan's Upanishads. After leaving a spirit seed in Sai's host soul, Shiyin quietly explored a little bit more and saw that everything was normal. He then retrieved his soul consciousness that had penetrated her head. Under Sai's frightened look, Shiyin suddenly grinned, dashed forward with his evil eyes, and fiercely kissed her ruddy lips. Whining, Sai's beautiful eyes glinted with a trace of shame. She wanted to struggle but couldn't make any move as her body was under Shiyin's control. Mercilessly kissing her, Shiyin moved his tongue on Sai's full lips and then bit them. Blood spread from her lips. Finally, the hand, which was buckling Sai's neck, loosened its grip, and Shiyin detached from her. Looking at the beautiful girl bleeding, he was suddenly overwhelmed with resentment inside his heart. He sneered, "You should have died in that lake, but I have saved you. But earlier, you just requited good with evil, and of course, I had to teach you a lesson. So, it was punishment. You are even more despicable than Aya." Sai's face was full of resentment, cruelly staring at Shiyin and cursing him. Shiyin burst out laughing. The same. Chapter 374, Coming Ashore. Chapter 374, Coming Ashore. Sai's eyes were flooded with hatred, viciously staring at Shiyin. She was resentful that she couldn't kill him right away to vent her flame of anger. Unfortunately, she knew that killing Shiyin at the bottom of the lake was a difficult mission and nearly impossible to do, especially now that her host soul was under his control. As long as Shiyin's mind could be triggered, he could use the soul barrier which had been planted in Sai's host soul to obliterate her host soul immediately. Inside the dark shield, Kai gritted her teeth while her heart was overwhelmed with hatred and shame. She didn't say a word, took out a set of fluttering ribbon clothes from her storage ring and put them on, covering her snow-white body. Shiyin's look was evil, gazing at her as she put her clothes on, not having the consideration to turn away. Kai was extremely embarrassed and full of resentment, but she knew she couldn't do anything to him. After she had dressed, Shiyin suddenly smiled and said coldly, "That octopus is dead, and I don't want Aya and the others to know that it was dead in my hand. I also hope that you can cover for what happened under the water after Aya left. You've confined my host soul. What do you want?" After having dressed, Sai's mood had stabilized. When she remembered how bad Shiyin had treated her, her neck reddened. She now realized that Shiyin was not someone she could control, and she secretly regretted proposing to keep him before. This was like she had bought a rope to tie herself up. Not only did she fail to use Shiyin to constrain Aya, but she ended up harming herself. I do not know much about this dark magnetic noxious mist, so I hope you can explain it to me in detail. I am also curious about the identities of the 5 of you. So, you will tell me about that as well, said Shiyin emotionlessly. As for the dark magnetic noxious mist, Laoli has told you quite precisely. For other things, I think we can talk about it later. Kai looked a little anxious, watching the water. We should be in a hurry. If we return late, Aya and other people may think that we are dead and will probably leave this place. Although Aya is a hateful person, she had many secret treasures in her hands. Staying with her, you can detect something unexpected and avoid a lot of trouble. Thanks to her reminder, Shiyin realized that the time he stayed in the water was too long. He thought a little bit and then nodded. Anyway, you should remember that I have planted a soul barrier in your host soul. If you dare to have any wicked intentions, don't blame me for being merciless. Sai's face lost its color. She gritted her teeth, nodded, and secretly cursed Shurien for being a shameless brat. Shurien looked at her with a faint smile. He knew that Kai hated him a lot, but he didn't really care about it. At least before the soul barrier inside Sai's host's soul is lifted, he wouldn't need to be worried. Did you kill the thousand-hand ink octopus? Kai looked at the lake outside the stone cave, thought for a while, and then asked him. Shurien rubbed his chin and nodded. Kai knitted her eyebrows and then flew out of the stone cave, sinking toward the bottom of the lake to find the thousand-hand ink octopus's dead body. Shurien didn't know what she wanted to do, and thus followed her flying out of the cave with suspicion. He suspended in the water, frowning and looking at her. Kai dove all the way to the bottom of the lake. When she reached the bottom, her delicate body gracefully moved like a rainbow toward the thousand-hand ink octopus's dead body. She took out a splendid, radiant dagger and dug out the octopus's eyes. Not long after that, Kai flew up next to Shurien, holding the octopus's eyeballs in her hands, and then said to Shurien, "This 7th level, the thousand-hand ink octopus's eyeballs can form a fantasy. We couldn't see the real scene under the water before due to the effect of these eyeballs. You have got the demon crystal, so these eyeballs belong to me. Are you okay with this?" "You just take them," nodded Shurien. Kai immediately put the octopus's eyeballs away. She contemplated for a while before aggressively looking at Shurien. "I hope you will keep the secret about the incident that happened in the water. I don't want anyone to know about this no matter what. You should also be careful with Aya. She is the daughter of the Castellan of White Emperor City. In White Emperor City, we are pampered girls who are always to keep ourselves pure. As you have seen our bodies this time, with Aya's personality, I am afraid that she will not spare you. You should keep that in mind." White Emperor City, Shurien muttered, didn't ask for details, just nodded and said, "I know." Kai didn't continue their conversation, suppressing her hatred for Shurien with a reddened face. She then flew up toward the lake surface. Shurien immediately kept up with her. On the lake, when Aya got out of the water, a brilliant halo fully covered her wonderful curves. She quickly found a remote place to put on new clothes, and only after that did she go to see Borg, Laoli, and Laoluin. The three of them had been impatiently waiting for a long time. As soon as they saw Aya came out, they hurriedly asked about the situation. Aya told them a little bit about what took place at the bottom of the lake, and also said that Kai and Shurien might not return. Right after hearing about the 7th level, the thousand-hand ink octopus, the faces of the three of them changed slightly. They were secretly glad that they hadn't recklessly broken into the water, or else they were afraid that they would have had the same consequence as that of Shurien and Kai. Aya told them about the situation in detail, blankly staring at the water without daring to go back in again. Borg and the two brothers Lao were in a daze waiting with worried faces. They were ready to abandon Shurien and Kai. If Shurien and Kai didn't come out soon, Aya and the others would leave. Borg had always been together with Kai. However, seeing Kai in danger, he was not ready to save her, but just frustrated. He was considering what he should do if he was alone with Aya and the other people from now on. While the four of them were waiting impatiently and about to give up on Shurien and Kai, two figures suddenly flew out of the lake. They were Shurien and Kai. Borg was overjoyed and quickly shouted, "Sister, are you all right?" After Kai had flown out of the lake, her face regained its normal state. She threw Borg a cold glance and nodded, "I am fine." Shurien and I united and killed the thousand-hand ink octopus. After talking, Kai couldn't help but look at Aya and grunt. In their critical point of time when they were trapped, Aya hadn't seen Kai as her partner, hadn't lent her a helping hand, but left her in danger instead. Kai understood it well, and thus was extremely dissatisfied with Aya. A trace of surprise flashed up in Aya's beautiful eyes. She stared at Shurien with surprise as her countenance became odd. She would never have expected that Shurien wouldn't have been killed inside the thousand-hand ink octopus's mouth. When she was at the bottom of the lake, Shurien had seen her entire body and her forbidden privates. If Shurien had died, she would have been relieved. However, Shurien was still alive, which somehow made her uncomfortable. In her eyes, Shurien's calm and cold eyes contained a lustful look like a thorn poking her side. After throwing Shurien a quick glance, Aya was very panicked. She wanted to take action but couldn't find any suitable excuse. She couldn't tell other people about what had happened in the lake either. In this dilemma, she felt frustrated without any clear reasons. That's good. I need to recover. I think that you guys should use demon crystals to restore your profound chi. See you soon. After talking, Aya turned around and left. She didn't dare to look at Shurien because she seemed embarrassed as she quickly flew away. Shurien watched her leave, showing a look of ridicule on his face. He sneered but didn't say a word. Yes, we need to recover a bit. Kai complicatedly glanced at Shurien, and then nodded toward Borg, and flew away to the opposite direction of Aya. Borg hurriedly caught up with her. When they came to a remote and quiet place, Borg asked quickly, "Sister, what happened at the bottom of the lake? Why do you and Aya seem to be weird after coming out of the lake?" "You ask too many questions." Sai's face looked cold. "You knew that I was in danger at the bottom of the lake. Why did you still stay ashore?" "Borg, do you want me to die as well?" Borg's face stiffened. He was very embarrassed and then revealed a wry smile. "Sister, you are in the sky realm but still got trapped at the bottom of the lake. I was afraid." Kai snorted coldly and didn't say anything further. She then took out a demon crystal, closed her eyes for meditation, not mentioning anything about what happened at the bottom of the lake. Although Borg was extremely curious, he couldn't do anything when Kai didn't want to tell him. Moreover, he felt ashamed, so he didn't dare to continue asking, only stayed next to Kai to do his job of guarding. "Brother, you and Kai are powerful indeed. You guys killed the 1,000-hand ink octopus. I really admire you." Laoli laughed out loud and said, "I am not afraid if you laugh at me, but we didn't dare to go into the water when you were trapped at the bottom of the lake. We were scared of being killed by that 1,000-hand ink octopus. It is such a shame." Lao Luan revealed an embarrassed smile, nodded his head and frankly admitted to being a coward. Shurien had soon come to know the personality of these two brothers, so he didn't tell them about what had happened at the bottom of the lake. He shook his head and said, "My luck is still good, I think. If it weren't for Aya and Kai, that 1,000-hand ink octopus wouldn't have died." After a short pause, Shurien nodded toward these two brothers and said, "I need to find a quiet place to recover for a while." After talking, Shurien quickly flew away and didn't say anything more to the two brothers, Laoli and Laoluan. Shurien went to the same place as before, lazily leaning against an ancient tree, quietly feeling the changes in his body. The three dead warriors' auras transformed into a mystery power pouring into the profound chi, recovering his consumed profound chi entirely, and also slightly enhancing his strength. According to this progress, he would soon have a chance to reach the third sky of Nirvana realm. Everything was developing in a good direction. Shurien was satisfied as he raised his head looking toward the deep area in the dark magnetic noxious mist, guessing what he would encounter in the deepest area of it. Suddenly, his eyes slightly narrowed while blooming out a cold light. His lazy posture suddenly straightened up. An imposing and violent momentum flowed out from his whole body. A shadow quickly approached from the distance. Her clothes fluttered, making her look like a frosty crystal flower in the cold snow. She was Aya. Aya was emotionless with an indifferent look. She gently flew over like a slender willow. Shurien's face didn't change. He felt cold at heart but was secretly on alert and ready for war. Chapter 375, The Hunter. Chapter 375, The Hunter. Shurien soon found out that Aya was a ruthless person and no better than Kai. At the bottom of the lake, when he had been sinking toward the octopus's mouth, he had clearly seen Aya let out a sigh of relief. Before leaving the lake, Kai had also reminded him to be careful with Aya. She had told him that Aya was the daughter of the master of White Emperor City, very arrogant and crystal pure. As he had seen her naked body, she certainly would want to kill him. Therefore, seeing Aya suddenly approach, Shurien secretly stayed alert and was ready to deal with Aya's attack. Wearing a cold face and fluttering clothes, Aya quickly flew over and stood in front of him. Shurian's face remained unchanged. He indifferently looked at her, but was secretly well-prepared and grinned. "Didn't you go to find a quiet place for meditation?" Aya's beautiful eyes intensely looked at Shurian, and she didn't hurry to answer. Her beautiful eyes flashed up with countless points of light, wanting to see through all Shurian's secrets. A faint smile hung on Shurian's face. He calmly confronted her, not revealing any trace of fear, as if nothing had ever happened at the bottom of the lake. Aya stared at Shurian for a while and then gently nodded and said, "I really want to meditate to restore my profound chi. The thousand-hand ink octopus injured me, and thus, I have lost a considerable amount of strength and must meditate immediately. It is just that this place seems to have many abnormalities, and I am now injured and very weak. So, I need someone to guard while I am meditating." Shurian was startled. He had originally assumed that Aya came here to kill him so that her heart could release its predicament. Not only could this put her state of mind at ease, but it could also preserve her pure body from being stained by his eyes. He didn't expect that Aya came here to ask him to guard for her without mentioning the incident at the bottom of the lake as if nothing had ever happened. Although he was suspicious, he didn't reveal it. He just nodded and said, "Okay." Aya didn't say a word as she sat down in front of Shurian. The storage ring on her finger flashed up. Sparkling demon crystals emerged one by one in her jade-like palm. These demon crystals were different in size, and there were total 10 pieces which contained the power that could be absorbed directly. It should be Aya's entire gains during her time here. Her hands held a piece of demon crystal. She seemed to be sure to take that one to restore her profound chi, but then she suddenly looked hesitant. Shurian bewilderedly looked at those sparkling demon crystal in shock, as he didn't expect that Aya could have harvested so many. With as many demon crystals gathered in the same place, any warrior in this dark, magnetic, noxious mist would probably be greedy and rob her of these precious crystals. However, for Shurian, although these demon crystals were precious, they couldn't make him lose his mind. Aya held each of those demon crystals and observed them while tightly knitting her eyebrows. Not long after that, she picked a red diamond-shaped demon crystal and put the rest back inside her storage ring. She then told Shurian, "I am severely injured now. Don't let anyone come close. Otherwise, if I encounter a sneak attack during my meditation, I will not be able to bear it." Shurian's face slightly changed. His heart stirred a little bit while his body was agitated. He suddenly understood what was happening. It was an explicit enticement. She had taken out all of the demon crystals to engender his greed. She had even told him clearly that she was now injured seriously to make him think about ambushing her. Aya apparently wanted to kill him but couldn't find a suitable excuse. That was why she had used the demon crystals as bait to raise his greed, and thus trying to make him desperate to take this chance when she was meditating. Each demon crystal was a piece of bait. She had even said that she was wounded and afraid of other people coming close, which actually encouraged him to buy into her plan. Shurian coldly sneered at heart, figuring out Aya's intention. He secretly cursed her for being deceitful and ruthless. If it weren't because he didn't need demon crystals to restore his profound chi, he would probably have taken the bait. If he decided to take action, he was sure that Aya would have told Kai, Borg, and the two brothers about it and used it as a suitable excuse to kill him. Greedily depriving and killing a companion for demon crystals was an extremely appropriate reason. When Aya was meditating, Shurian was coldly looking at her. He was struggling inside his heart while his eyes kept changing. If he took advantage of when she was meditating to cast out his hidden full strength, perhaps he would be able to kill Aya even though Aya had prepared her own calculation toward him. However, the risk was big. If he tried to kill Aya with just one blow and failed, they both would get involved in a fight, which would definitely draw the attention of other people. When those people rushed over, he would hardly succeed. Once Aya successfully avoided his single strike and was still alive, it would not be easy to try and kill her a second time. While he was quietly considering his gains and losses, Shurian's eyes kept changing unpredictably. He finally decided to give up. He wanted to keep things going on to see if she had any other tricks up her sleeve. He then stood next to Aya. leaned against a tree with a lazy pose, pretending to keep guard for Aya. A long while later, with his sole consciousness, Shurian suddenly realized that something wasn't quite right with Kai. On the other side, Kai secretly wanted to look at the soul barrier in her host's soul, but her body then suddenly shook, her face turned pale, holding her head miserably. Sister, sister. Borg was panicked. He even assumed that Kai had fallen into a possessed by the devil state and hastily cried, "How are you? Are you okay? How can I help you?" Damn bastard. Kai secretly cursed Shurian in her heart, holding her head as she whined in pain for a while. Her beautiful face was full of resentment while her body gradually stopped trembling. She knew that it was Shurian teaching her a lesson, but he hadn't really hit her soul yet. Otherwise, with this soul barrier, she would not be able to bear even one single blow. I am all right. There was something wrong with my power, but it is fine again. Kai barely sat straight, didn't dare to continue to peep at the soul barrier. She then used a demon crystal again to restore her profound chi. Not far away, Shurian revealed a cold smile, raised his head and glanced at Kai. After a long while, Aya slowly opened her eyes. The power of the demon crystal in her hand had been absorbed entirely, and it became an ordinary stone. She was a little disappointed, looking at Shurian, as she silently stood up and said, "I am done. Let's go find Kai and the others." Shurian nodded, but coldly sneered in his heart and kept silent. He clearly saw a trace of disappointment flash up in Naina's eyes. Through those eyes, he figured out that Aya didn't have a good intention indeed. She had still stayed alert while meditating. If he had a go at her, Aya would obviously release a full power strike to kill him. Women's hearts are the most ruthless. Shurian secretly scolded her, following Aya while his eyes were stuck on her moving, but in back with an unpredictable look. Aya suddenly turned around. Her eyes showed her coldness. Shurian was startled. His profound chi started to churn up, and a frenzy of power couldn't help but burst out from his body. Aya looked at him fiercely and said coldly, "You should keep your eyes clean." After saying this, she turned back and continued to fly up. Shurian was stunned, shook his head and slightly smiled, not saying anything more. Kai, Borg, together with Laoli and Laoluan soon appeared in front of him. As soon as Kai saw him coming, her beautiful eyes aggressively stared at him, shooting out looks of resentment. Shrugging his shoulders, Shurian revealed a faint smile, pretending that there was nothing to talk about. "Should we depart now?" Kai knew that she had the lower hand and tried to restrain her anger. She stopped looking at Shurian and then spoke to Aya. "Let's go?" Aya nodded, looked at the other four people Kai Borg and said, "Follow me." After taking out the compass to identify the direction, Aya led ahead like before, and continued to go to the deepest place of the dark magnetic noxious mist. A long period had passed. They kept following Aya going deeper inside the dark magnetic noxious mist. Every time Aya detected something abnormal, she would instantly let Shurian step forward to take the risk, waiting for Shurian to be dead in the demon beast's mouths or be killed by other warriors. Shurian let her down every time. In all kinds of dangers, he could always turn danger to safety, which he made look like it was because of his great luck and nothing to do with his strength. During this time, Shurian and the other 5 people had encountered several flocks of beasts and had harvested some demon crystals through killing them. They had also met other teams of warriors, and both sides had started fighting. In the dark magnetic noxious mist, there were no rules at all. Those who were powerful could always plunder demon crystals from the weak. Every time they saw other groups of warriors, the people of Aya's and Taiwai's group instantly jumped in to kill them without saying a word. They were even more ruthless than the beasts. Shurian had still been preserving his strength. His demand of demon crystal was not much. Every time they encountered beasts, he didn't wholeheartedly take action or fight with Aya's group for demon crystals. When confronting warriors, he didn't make it look very strenuous either, didn't seem to have interest for the storage rings on those warriors' body. He let Aya and Kai take the trophies. He didn't seem to be greedy as he just stood and watched the scene. However, by absorbing the auras of those dead warriors, Shurien could always refill his profound chi to the max as if he just began, which also helped him progress in breaking through the third sky of Nirvana realm. However, many times after that, the mysterious power didn't flow to the profound chi halo anymore, but burst into the star martial spirits instead. This made Shurien realize that the profound chi halo in his body was mighty enough. If he wanted to make progress, it probably would require him to reach the third sky of Nirvana realm. Therefore, he quietly paid attention, considering breaking through the new realm was his main purpose. One day, the group of 6 people, including Shurien, was temporarily resting on a suspended bare hill in the dark magnetic noxious mist. Suddenly, ear-piercing sounds came up from around the hill. Warriors in gold costumes instantly appeared, grinned, and rushed over to the 6 of them. Along the way there, other warriors had become the prey of Aya's and Tsai's group. However, right now, seeing those warriors in gold costumes, the faces of Aya and others immediately changed as if they were confronted with a pandemic. They quickly got up. Shurien frowned as he looked around. His heart felt chilled just after a quick glance as he was afraid that they would become someone else's prey this time. Chapter 376, Filled with Golden Silk Threads. Chapter 376, Filled with Golden Silk Threads. There were 8 warriors surrounding them. All of them were wearing gold costumes with a pattern of a palace afloat the golden clouds, which was embroidered on their chest in golden threads. The 8 warriors were all outstanding youths, only around 20 or 30 years old. 3 of them were in the Sky Realm. The rest were in the 2nd or 3rd sky of Nirvana Realm. The leader of these 8 warriors had short, silver hair, each strand of which stood straight up. He looked full of vitality. As soon as this person arrived, he burst into laughter which was echoing and ear-piercing. He looked at Kai and Aya with extremely lustful eyes and an ambiguous face. The remaining 7 warriors lined up, sharply looking at Shurien's group with an unfriendly attitude. Aya's and Tsai's beautiful faces slightly changed and were no longer calm as before. Borg was obviously in shock and fear. The faces of the 2 brothers Laoli and Laoluan looked odd. Their eyes beamed a vague light. They seemed to be considering an escape plan. The overall strength of this group of 8 warriors was much better than that of Shurien's side. Sharp lights spilled out from the eyes of the 3 Sky Realm warriors who were overwhelmed with an arrogant and relentless momentum that shouldn't be underestimated. When Shurien saw the emergence of these warriors and Aya's and Tsai's complexions, he immediately realized that these 8 warriors must come from a mighty force since Aya and Kai looked like they were encountering a pandemic. He knew that they would certainly have a bitter fight later. Ningze, what do you want? Aya slightly squinted, quietly gathered her strength, coldly looked at that young leader, and said, "The Fighting Union and the Heavenly Palace have never had any conflicts before. As you are now converging on us, you have probably prepared for this war?" Ha ha ha, that young leader laughed out loud, as he obviously didn't care about Aya's threat. If we run into each other in the Divine Land, I naturally would not give you a hard time. However, this place is the dark magnetic noxious mist. We come to this place to provoke a fight with all kinds of forces obviously. Since you guys also come to this place, if you're strong enough, I don't think you would be kind to us either. After having heard that warrior's words, Aya's face darkened. She then said, "Do you really want to pick a fight?" "Not really." Ningze revealed a faint smile as he secretly winked at the other 2 Sky Realm warriors on the sides, exposing a smiling face. "Aya, you are the daughter of the Castellan of White Emperor City. I am also influential in the Heavenly Palace. As long as you promise to marry me, I can spare your life and even join forces with you in this dark magnetic noxious mist. How about it?" "Keep dreaming." Aya pouted and expressed a disdainful look. "Are you forcing me to use my strength?" The smile on Ning's face suddenly disappeared, and his eyes became cold. "Aya, although you are noble in White Emperor City, you are nothing in this dark magnetic noxious mist. Ha ha ha, if you are not willing to accept my offer, I can only offend you to achieve my purpose." After saying so, Ningze suddenly shouted with a cold smile, "Leave the 2 girls alive. Kill the rest." After that command, the 8 Heavenly Palace's warriors let out a hoarse shout and took action simultaneously. The 2 Sky Realm warriors next to Ningxia scattered and respectively stormed toward Aya and Kai. The remaining Nirvana Realm warriors fanned out, attacking Shiyin, Borg, Laoli, and Laoluan. These Heavenly Palace's warriors wore unified in their gold costumes and had extraordinary realms and resourceful storage rings. They were wealthy and powerful. A 3rd Sky of Nirvana Realm warrior with a thin face was currently dashing toward Shiyin while his hands suddenly swelled, turning into a beam of dazzling golden lights. The warrior's 2 hands instantly shot out brilliant lights with a sharp momentum. A trace of refined profound chi emerged from between his hands. His hands were swelling more and more, which was extremely weird. His hands unfolded, and the lines in his palms released thread-like silks. These golden silk threads connected to his palms. They seemed extremely sharp and dexterous like a steel needle flying straight for Shiyin. Buzzing, a harsh whistle came up. Those golden threads scattered everywhere, extended more and more, became denser, and then covered Shiyin entirely. Shiyin's face remained unchanged. He frowned and suddenly turned into a bunch of starlight, following the star trajectory and quickly teleported himself to the side. Those golden silk threads intensely submerged Shiyin's previous spot that he had just left. They then crushed the rocks there into pieces like cutting tofu. Golden silk. A cold laugh reached his ears. Those gold threads were like electricity that shot out again, spearing themselves toward Shiyin. These Heavenly Palace's warriors seemed to be very good at strange martial arts. Inside of their palms had this kind of golden silk threads which contained sharp ardor that could cut everything off. After attentively looking at the others, Shiyin realized that they were afraid of those golden silk threads and didn't dare to let them come close. Seeing those golden threads dashing forward, the people of Aya's group immediately scattered as they were afraid of being pierced by the golden threads. Ningxia stood motionlessly, not really caring about Shiyin. His lustful eyes fell on Aya's and Tsai's bodies. He seemed to be waiting for both of them to be arrested so he could enjoy pleasures with them. Shiyin didn't know the origin of either the Heavenly Palace or the Fighting Union. However, after having heard the conversation between Aya and Ningxia, he realized that they belonged to the Divine Land and were very powerful forces. Although Aya and Ningxia were still very young, they had already reached the Sky Realm. Thus, Shiyin could imagine how powerful their forces were. Golden threads above their heads were extremely flexible and breathtaking, flashing out with harsh, ear-piercing sounds. The warrior who was chasing and attacking Shiyin didn't seem to be worried after he had missed his first shot. He continued urging his power. The golden silk threads flying out from his palms extended longer and longer with fierce momentum, continuing to chase Shiyin without giving up. There was a trace of a feeble soul on the golden silk threads. The Heavenly Palace's warriors seemed to bind their soul consciousness onto the threads, making them able to lock the target. Regardless of how hard Shiyin tried to avoid them, these threads could always find him again. Those warriors' hands were swollen and constantly released extremely sharp, glittering lights. Gradually, the golden silk threads soon covered the entire sky like countless golden lightning bolts interlacing in the sky. This made people feel frightened. Wailing, Borg suddenly let out mournful screams. He had been avoiding the golden silk threads, but carelessly let one of them cross him and cut off a part of his leg. Blood overflowed like a spring. Borg kept screaming non-stop as he fearfully looked at Kai, wanting her help. The rings on Tsai's arms had all flown out. Those rings hit each other, producing crisp, sweet sounds and blooming numerous dazzling lights which then formed into many circles of lights and covered her entire beautiful body, protecting her from being damaged by the golden silk threads. A Sky Realm warrior's swollen hands looked like they were perfused with golden juice which now slowly flowed out. Golden silk threads flew out from between his swollen hands like tiny pythons jumping cheerfully and gradually blockading the space around her. Her graceful posture moved tenderly. The circles of light and the golden silk threads collided, sparking dazzling light spots everywhere. Although Tsai's cultivation base was high, she couldn't get out of the thick golden silk threads around her. She saw Borg unable to resist anymore, but it was impossible for her to reach out to help him. Golden silkworms split. The warrior who was dealing with Borg revealed a cold sneer. More than 10 golden silk threads flew out from his swollen hands, heading toward Borg and fully covering him instantly. Brilliant golden light flashed up under Shurian's gaze. Borg's body suddenly turned into broken pieces of flesh and bones. Borg, who was in the third sky of Nirvana realm, was unable to escape and had been cut into countless pieces under the coverage of those golden silk threads. Before Borg's death, Shurian had seen a golden wire coming out of Borg's back. A warrior who was fighting with Laoli had suddenly spared a part of his force and had quietly used the golden threads to pierce through Borg, making him unable to gather his strength. The magical golden silk was the unique martial arts that only the Heavenly Palace's warriors had. If they wanted to cultivate it successfully, they needed to collect the silks taken from the myriad devouring golden silkworm in a secret place of the divine land, and then cultivate and absorb it into their bodies. Each warrior who practiced this secret magical technique all golden-style martial spirit. They then used this martial spirit and their profound chi to nourish this golden silk, blending their blood, soul consciousness, and profound chi into golden silk. After many years of arduous pilgrimages, the golden silk that was cultivated and absorbed into the warriors' bodies not only possessed the special features of the myriad devouring golden silkworm, but could also connect with their minds and stay under their control. Cultivating this secret gold silk was extremely dangerous for the Heavenly Palace's warriors. Their bodies could instantly be divided if they were careless. Heavenly Palace's warriors who could cultivate this secret technique were all cruel and ruthless, not even thinking about risking their own lives. The warriors would become extremely dangerous when they cast the golden silk out. Once performing this secret technique, if there were no strong means of defense, this golden silk would split other people's bodies. Borg didn't have much means of defending himself with one of his legs cut off, and the golden silk pierced through from his back. Because of those things, Borg apparently couldn't escape death, although he had the third sky of Nirvana realm cultivation base. As soon as he died, his scattering aura flowed into Shurian. Shurian was avoiding the golden silk threads. However, when seeing Borg had died, Shurian quietly moved forward and absorbed the aura from Borg. Feeling the influx of Borg's aura, Shurian calmly looked at the golden silk threads flying around in the sky, and suddenly grinned in silence as he just came up with a vicious plan in his mind. Chapter 377. Add Wings to the Tiger. Chapter 377. Add Wings to the Tiger. Right after Borg had died, that Empyrean warrior looked more relaxed. The Empyrean side had a total of 3 Sky Realm warriors, including Ningzhe. The remaining warriors were at the second or third sky of Nirvana realm. All of them had cultivated this evil secret technique of the Empyrean. When they united, it didn't matter who they were fighting. Borg was dead, and Laoli and Laoluin immediately fell into danger. Although these two brothers were only in the third sky of Nirvana realm, they were very good at joining forces. They stood back to back. 2 different forces passed each other through their backs, making their momentum soar. Their bodies were covered with a mixed green and blue halo. That halo covered the 2 brothers entirely. When the golden silk threads in the sky came close to them, they hurriedly took actions, wearing their gloves from where strong momentum flowed out. Their momentum was like martial art conception that had been tempered on their gloves. These gloves were naturally not just ordinary things. Under their martial art conception, these gloves released a terrible and fierce power. Under this violent power, those golden silk threads were punched aside before they could come close to the 2 brothers. Those threads, which occasionally showed up next to the halo, couldn't destroy the blue-green halo that was covering the 2 brothers. However, after Borg's death, the warrior who had dealt with Borg now retrieved his power, looked at the 2 brothers, and cast it again toward them. Hundreds of golden silk threads intertwined and dashed forward. The golden threads like lightning split open, releasing numerous sharp sprays, making the 2 brothers a little confused. While their gloves were releasing the martial art conception, They also had to unite to deal with this stealth at the same time. Thus, they didn't seem to be able to resist anymore. More and more golden silk threads were approaching and getting closer to them. Shurian's eyes were cold and cruel. He relied on the starlight to avoid the winding golden threads. He was both absorbing the aura of Deadborg while quietly observing the situation in the field. Not only did Aya and Kai have many secret treasures on their bodies, but they were also extremely good at martial arts cultivation. Therefore, in the encirclement of the golden silk threads, they were still safe and sound. Although they couldn't get out of those golden threads, they didn't seem to be defeated, and they were still able to persist for a long time. Carefully watching the situation, Shurian coldly sneered. He quietly released his profound chi, the star power, the negative forces, and the Een power from inside his body and sneakily manipulated them toward the Empyrean's warriors who were besieging Laoli and Laoluin. The ice-cold flame, the Holy Spirit God, and the earth flame had been integrated into his body muscles before the completion of his martial spirit's mutation. Although his body's muscles contained a surge of violent power, it could not be separated or taken out of his body. Therefore, a gravitational field was formed this time only relying on the profound chi, the star power, the negative forces, and Een force. These four forces created the gravitational field. As soon as it appeared, it suddenly condensed into an entity, forming an enormous gray tornado, inside of which the four sharp forces spanned aggressively. The gravitational field used to hide without revealing any trace, but it was unknown why it turned into a real entity here. In that gray tornado, the four forces flew around and mutually entangled, resulting in a strange, fierce power. Even Shurian felt that it was very dangerous for him if he were inside it. His power increased. In this dark magnetic noxious mist, although the gravitational field had turned into a real entity and couldn't be concealed anymore, its power had increased more than double. It seemed to coincide with a sort of heaven and earth principle in this dark magnetic noxious mist. It kept spinning, which made it seem like there was an existence of strange fluctuations inside the dark magnetic noxious mist, forming a link with the gravitational field. The gray tornado released a whirlwind up to the sky with tremendous momentum. As soon as it appeared, it instantly drew all the creatures around. Fierce, long, thin golden threads like lightning in the sky were pursuing Shurian, Laoli, and Laoluin. When that gravitational field emerged, the whole space seemed to be affected by the impact of the suction. The golden threads were no exception. The fierce golden silk threads were all sucked into the gravitational field. Even the heavenly palace warriors couldn't prevent their golden threads from being pulled in. When the golden silk threads went into the gravitational field, each of the heavenly palace warriors who held the golden silk screamed in panic while their faces suddenly changed. The body of a heavenly palace warrior with the weakest cultivation base, which was the second sky of Nirvana realm, was also pulled into the gravitational field. Because the golden silk was connected with the warrior's body, he was also being drawn into the gravitational field, and he couldn't withstand the suction of the gravitational field anymore as he was finally pulled inside. Inside the giant gray tornado, for different strange powers flew around and pulled the gold silk that was circling inside as well. Right after that warrior had been drawn into the field, he was instantly killed by the gold silk and then cut into mixed flesh and blood. When these Empyrean warriors cultivated the gold silk, they connected their palms to it. The lines on their palms and the gold silk had formed a delicate, subtle connection, and they could use their minds to control it. Unless they had reached the god realm, they couldn't detach the gold silk from their palms to freely chase and kill their enemies. Therefore, after the gold silk had been sucked into the gravitational field, as the palms of their hands were connected to the gold silk, the warriors were also affected by the strong suction force from the gravitational field. Moreover, the gold silk inside the gravitational field also created a huge pulling force. The warriors looked very miserable as they struggled hard to escape from the gray tornado formed by the gravitational field. "It's you." Sai's eyes suddenly brightened up. When she had been at the bottom of the lake, she had known that Shurian was not easy to mess with. At this critical time, the gray tornado appeared in front of Shurian. Shurian had a mocking sneer on his cold face as he watched the Empyrean warriors being pulled into the gravitational field and minced into bloody pieces of flesh. Kai now realized that Shurian was the one who was changing the situation here. Kai exclaimed in shock, which drew the attention of the others to Shurian. A strange light flashed up in Aya's eyes. She didn't seem to expect in this critical time, Shurian, who was only in the Nirvana realm, would be the most effective one. With a cruel look and a cold sneer, he used some kind of secret technique to strangle those warriors, which made her extremely shocked. Laoli and Laoluan had been in danger and would have probably been killed by the Empyrean's warriors. At the most dangerous time, Shurian suddenly took action, creating the gravitational field and forcing those warriors to divide their strength in an attempt to resist. Thus, the strength they had been focusing on the two brothers Laoluan and Laoli was reduced, which made the two brothers surprised and frightened at the same time. They kept thanking Shurian. Shurian's eyes were furious. He coldly sneered while continuing to maintain the gravitational field, bringing it toward the rest of the Heavenly Palace warriors who were gathering at the same place. Under the irresistible pulling force, another two of the Heavenly Palace's third sky of Nirvana realm warriors were drawn into the gravitational field. The gravitational field was full of gold silks which were all fatal. Once those warriors were sucked into the gravitational field, the forces inside completely controlled them, and thus, they could hardly form a fully defensive halo for their entire bodies. As a result, their bodies were exposed. In this situation, being strangled and cut off by the four strange forces of the gravitational field, those warriors couldn't escape from death. Just after a moment, the two Heavenly Palace warriors who had fallen into the gravitational field were all dead. As soon as these two warriors were ripped into pieces, the remaining warriors were all filled with panic. Seeing the gravitational field approaching, even the two Sky Realm warriors, who were dealing with Aya and Kai, were frightened, and thus loosened their force toward Aya and Kai to hurriedly move aside to avoid the gravitational field. However, although these two warriors dodged very fast, the gold silks that they had released failed to escape the great suction of the gravitational field. As the ferocious golden silks were forcefully pulled into the gravitational field, the two Sky Realm warriors who were deviating from the gravitational field were also being pulled. Because these two warriors were connected with the gold silks, they were also gradually pulled into the gravitational field. "Young master, save me," a Sky Realm warrior screamed out loud. His fierce eyes looked at Shurian and shouted, "It's that kid who has troubled us." Ningze didn't take any action, but just coldly watched the changes in the field. When the two Empyrean warriors had been crushed into powder, he hadn't revealed any trace of fear. It seemed that the death of those Nirvana Realm warriors was nothing to him. However, when the two Sky Realm warriors who had released the gold silks had also been pulled into the gravitational field and screamed out loud together, Ninja finally showed a grave look. "Be careful." Aya and Kai didn't bother with their hatred for Shurian, simultaneously letting out a scream and flying toward the front of Shurian. One on the left and the other on the right, they were both protecting Shurian, coldly looking at Ningze who was storming at them very fast. Although Aya and Kai were ruthless and wanted to see Shurian die sooner, they still understood their current situation. If they wanted to defeat the Heavenly Palace warriors, they had to rely on the gray tornado that Shurian had created. Therefore, when Ningze was about to make a move, both of them immediately rushed to Shurian's side, wanting to join forces to protect him. Shurian was about to take action and then became panicked seeing the two girls suddenly fly over. After realizing the girls just wanted to offer him protection, he shook his head and smiled and was not in a hurry to release his power. He stood behind Aya and Kai and continued manipulating the gravitational field. The gold silks that were released by the Heavenly Palace warriors were extremely sharp and evil, able to cut everything. Those golden silks had fallen into the gravitational field, stirred up by the forces of the gravitational field, and thus, their power was skyrocketed instantly. Anyone who fell into this gravitational field would be crushed into powder by the gold silk. Seeing the gold silk fly into the gravitational field aggressively, Shurian's heart dissipated. He then had an idea that he would try to collect as much of the gold silks from this myriad devouring golden silkworm as possible. This stuff and the gravitational field together was indeed a killing machine. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.